We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
What's Pro Football Focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady. We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Do you not understand that they are that way because you're Joe Flacco?
You just like to discredit things that people deserve credit for.
That you can't possibly be expected to defend that.
Talk about the game, Sam.
So,
who cares about what people think about us?
Yeah, I like football season, and all the things that go with
it. Welcome into the PFF NFL podcast. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We're back going through all of our draft grades, Sam. We're halfway through, and today it's all about the NFC South and the NFC West.
Halfway? So soon?
So soon. Yeah, it's only taken us 4 hours to get there. That's right. We're going to have about 8 hours of draft grade content. Everyone else just does a draft grade review show. Try to cram it into an hour. Nope, not us.
Here.
8 hours of goodness here.
Uh-huh. Where are we going now?
The NFC.
Okay.
The West and the South.
The West and the South.
Which means the AFC South, how hard could it be? Always last. AFC West. That'll be tomorrow, Thursday morning, 10:30 a.m. Appreciate everybody live here on YouTube.
Just make sure you don't forget Tennessee again.
There's still a chance. They're going to be the last team. It's going to be the Titans. And, just crushing Titans fans again. So tell your friends to come watch us right now. We're live talking NFC West and NFC South. What you got going on? What's going on? Anything?
No. I'm sitting here for a podcast now. What do you got going on?
I'm going to podcast. We're going to talk some grades.
Okay.
All right, let's do what we've been doing. Renee Bugner over on Twitter. Has he added to this 29 evaluations? I'm using the 29 evaluations tweet.
Yeah, I haven't checked if there's been additions.
Renee's done a really nice job accumulating draft grades from all various sources, 29 different sources with a GPA, averaging all of the various grades. So we'll be using that to reference what the draft grades are. We'll give you PFF's draft grades. And I forget where we're starting. So we'll start with the NFC South or West. Where do you want to start? Let's go West. It's in the title first.
Okay.
NFC West. So who would be first in the NFC West? The Rams?
What?
Who's first?
Arizona.
I don't remember. Arizona Cardinals.
The one that begins with A.
I usually write it down. I'm unprepared. I was talking to Eric, having a little heart-to-heart upstairs.
Okay.
And here we are. Arizona Cardinals. They're up first in our NFC West draft review, and they finished 25th in the consensus rankings.
Harsh.
B- from PFF.
It's cold.
As well as Rickelson and Truscott. I think that's what the name. Keep bringing those guys up on every show. You're welcome, Rickelson, that we keep bringing you guys up because you're right next to PFF there. So we both gave B-, us and Rickelson. B- for the Arizona Cardinals. The big move that they made, though, is trading their first rounder for Marquise Brown. So I wonder if that has been baked in.
Which we can count by our rules.
By your rules in particular.
Yes.
That counts. What are your thoughts on that Cardinals move first? And then while we're here, we can talk about the DeAndre Hopkins news where he is out for the first 6 weeks of the season.
Yeah, and I suspect those are connected.
Nuke knew this back in November, I think.
Yeah,
he knew it a while ago.
The Cardinals knew that this was coming down the pipe, so they went and made a move for a wide receiver. They're going to lose their number one receiver for 6 games. They went that has to have played into how much they were willing to move to go get Marquise Brown. Then you add in, okay, now it's Marquise Brown, pairs up with Kyler Murray, teammates at Oklahoma. Great connection to Oklahoma, obviously. Kyler Murray and this Cardinals offense, I think, is a better fit for Marquise Brown than the Baltimore Ravens offense and Lamar Jackson, which he was agitating to get away from. So I think he's probably worth more to Arizona than he was to Baltimore, even before you get to the idea that even more so now they're going to be without a receiver for 6 games. The downside, obviously, is another player who at some point his contract is coming up, and you're already running out of guys that you want to pay money to. But I do think that one motivating factor is losing DeAndre Hopkins. I think another one is they're not giving Kyler Murray his money now, right? So if you're not going to pay him, you can make him a little bit happier by bringing in his favorite receiver from college.
That was my initial take on a lot of this stuff, and I broke it down on day 2 of the NFL Draft Live. I'm gonna rehash it right here because you and I have gone in depth with Kyler Murray and Instagram and what it means, right? What does it mean when Kyler Murray or Deebo Samuel or whoever deletes their references to their team? What does it mean? I mean, it's a strong statement. It is a statement of discontent, right? Kyler Murray's upset with the Cardinals. And then we theorized, how do the Cardinals respond? What do they do? Someone has to go to Steve Keim and say, how do we respond here on Instagram? And that's not comfortable for Steve Keim, the general manager. It's not comfortable for the Cardinals front office to have to respond to Kyler Murray through Instagram. But what they can do is respond through the draft and through their personnel moves. So this is their response. When Kyler Murray is deleting the Cardinals from their Instagram, the front office response is not through social media. It's through a first-round trade for Marquise Brown, your old buddy from Oklahoma, a second-round pick on Trey McBride, the best pass-catching tight end in this draft. The Cardinals are trying to make life good for Kyler Murray, and this is their response. A couple months later, but their response to the Instagram fiasco.
Yeah, they get a couple of low-round offensive linemen as well that were really good value relative to the PFF board, and I assume the consensus board. So Arizona, I think, had a pretty good draft in terms of focusing attention on Kyler Murray, which is a pretty good offset to, hey, sit there, be patient, you'll get your money eventually. It's not happening now. We don't want to do it now. Next year we'll give you your extension if you continue to look like, the leader of this franchise. And here, we'll meet you halfway. We'll give you a receiver. We'll give you a new tight end. We'll give you some offensive line help. Be happy. I think this is a pretty good draft for them.
So there's another thing at play here, and you have stated many times, not a big fan of Cliff Kingsbury and maybe the simplicity of the air raid and, hey, we left wide receiver here and you're a right wide receiver and there's not a lot of creativity and moving on. I wonder, the Trey McBride selection at tight end, does this force the Cardinals to be more creative? Because right now, they had Max Williams on the team. They have Zach Ertz on the team. Max Williams is one of the best all-around tight ends when healthy. Zach Ertz, still a decent pass-catching tight end. He made an impact last year. Trey McBride, a little bit in between. He can do both, but he is a good, movable, pass-catching option. Colorado State completely ran their offense through Trey McBride. Everything. They were throwing screens to him. They were throwing the ball down the field. They were splitting him out wide. He is a pass-catching tight end with good ball skills. They still have DeAndre Hopkins. He'll come back at some point. They have A.J. Green. Now they have Marquise Brown. They have Rondale Moore, who they drafted last year. So in part, I think this is, make Kyler happy. It's live our strategy out, which is, flood the field with playmakers. But does this elicit more creativity out of the Cardinals because you have so many pass catchers to work with here?
No.
I set the stage that they were going to force Kingsbury's hand. Like, well, how are you going to get Zach Ertz, Max Williams, and Trey McBride all on the field? How are you going to tap into those skill sets? You got to move McBride around a little bit to maximize him. He was your first selection. It was in the second round. He was your first draft pick here. They're going to do something for him.
Yeah, they're probably not going to get them all on the field at the same time. But that I don't think that necessarily means they're going to get more creative. I think it probably just means that Max Williams becomes a bench riding number 3 tight end.
Well, if I'm a team, I'm calling about Max Williams.
Look, if they haven't adapted and become more creative with easy wins like moving receivers around yet, I don't think they're going to do it now. I think that's just something they've determined that is part of the offense, whatever they believe the trade-off is. And look, generally the theory would be, certainly at the college level, you keep your guys in the same receiver spot, you are able to operate quicker than the defense because everybody knows where they are and what they're supposed to do. You can line up quickly, you can run, hurry up. There's no time wasting, essentially moving guys around, expecting them to learn extra things, and that gives you an advantage. I don't think it does at the next level. Or if it is, it's offset and then some by the advantage it gives the defense of knowing where the good receiver will be. So, look, I think it's something they should have already changed. The fact that they haven't suggests that they don't. And if they haven't come to that conclusion by now, they're probably not going to. Like, I don't think an addition of a tight end or, a loss of a receiver or whatever is going to immediately cause them to change tack. I think that's just the way this offense works.
The PFF NFL podcast is sponsored by Western and Southern Financial Group. Luckily, you've got first pick in selecting the right money moves. Do you need life insurance? What about help planning on your financial goals? Don't pass on this round. No trading down here. Use your position to expand your financial education and learn more with information on life insurance, investing, and retirement planning at westernsouthern.com/draft. It's westernsouthern.com/draft. We appreciate Western and Southern, the presenting sponsor here on the PFF NFL podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think, look, I was hoping maybe there'd be more creativity. Regardless, if guys are lined up in the same spot or not, they've got a good group of pass catchers. When DeAndre Hopkins comes back, see what A.J. Green still has left. He was a little better than I expected last year. Would you agree? We thought he may have completely lost it. He didn't completely lose it. He was a little better than I expected last year. Marquise Brown has been at his best as a vertical slot threat, something they drafted Andy Isabella to become, and he did not become that. I like the pieces that they have here in Arizona, and that started with Trey McBride. Now the questions become, they had late round offensive linemen for sure. They have a hole at right guard where Josh Jones just has not panned out whatsoever. So there'll be some competition there. They did go to the trenches for Cameron Thomas, Myjai Sanders, both in round 3. I think both of those guys are solid third rounders that can come in and contribute. Cam Thomas from San Diego State, bit of a tweener, could play edge, can play maybe rush from the interior a little bit, but he's 267. And Sanders, a productive edge. So I like both of those players there. I thought it was a solid draft overall, but you're hoping Lecitus Smith maybe comes in and competes at guard. He was a 6th rounder out of Virginia Tech. I know Renner liked him quite a bit. He was much higher on our board. Marquise Hayes, too, from Oklahoma. If you could steal a starter with one of those guards, get some contributions from those defensive linemen, add McBride to the mix as a pass catcher, maximize Marquise Brown. I mean, there's a lot of potential here. I'll say that with the Cardinals.
Yeah, and look, I also love everybody else searching for, giant superstars, big playmakers. The Cardinals going in the other direction. We're gonna throw all the resources in tiny people. We're gonna go short. While the rest of the league is zigging, we're gonna zag, and we're gonna get a whole offense of munchkins. Now you're gonna get Kyler Murray handing it off to Rondale Moore, throwing a pass to Marquise Brown. Tiny everywhere. It's great.
You think that's what they were going for?
Yeah.
They just wanted his buddy.
I think Kyler Murray throwing to Rondale Moore might be the shortest combination in NFL history. Now you add Marquise Brown into the mix, who's like 5'9".
It's true. They are shorter and speedy, twitchy. Maybe Calvin Austin.
They could have done with him. That would have been great.
Could have been there.
Yeah.
This is the opposite of the way the Falcons are building their team.
Yeah. They're getting a bunch of 6'5" guys. I mean, Arizona's going the other way.
Let's see if the Falcons want to sign me. Did you see the suggestion by Major League reporter Buster Olney that when you have baseball brawls, you might need just a 6'6", 350-pound enforcer just to break up the brawl? That's what he'll do. He'll be a bench coach, but his job is to just break up the brawl. I think I could do that.
I mean, when I've seen baseball brawls, they don't tend to be the type of thing that a single person could break up.
Yeah, because there's usually only one real fight in the brawl. It's part of the mechanics of it. I've been in there.
Yeah.
Mixing it up a little bit. It's just like, I'm mad at you, you're mad at me, you threw it at guys, my teammate. Yeah, you just, baseball talk's taking off here.
Yeah.
But there's usually like one guy who goes off the rails, and he's just like losing his mind.
Right.
And that's the guy you got to slow down. Everyone else, it's like I'm pushing, I'm shoving, I'm a righty, I don't want to punch. I know if I break my hand, I can't play. Like everybody's got some self-awareness.
But can you even get to that guy if he's in the middle of the melee?
If you're fast enough, like I am,
and big enough,
yeah. You go in, you go get. It was like Paul O'Neill a couple of years ago. The Yankees just went nuts. You get the one guy who goes crazy. That's the guy you got to break up. I could do that. It's my path to the big leagues.
You never get there.
I would get there in time.
You don't have that kind of pace.
Everybody's running from the same place.
Right. Which
He's
means
got
you'll
time
be last.
For one punch.
Everybody's running from the same place, which means you'll be behind them.
Now, I wouldn't like Izzy Alcantara. He's the guy who kicks the catcher in the head and then went to the mound and tried to take on the whole team. Like you're not going to be able to save the catcher, but you get to the mound in time before he goes to town.
You wouldn't.
I'd be in the dugout. Everyone else is coming from the field and from the bullpen.
It would be over by the time you got there.
No. I would get in shape. I'd get in better shape for this. If that was my job.
Yeah.
Assistant, bench coach / enforcer, I'd work out for that.
No, this is not a plan.
It's my path to the big leagues. I'm just saying, if you lose me on the show, that'd be the job.
I mean, I will credit you in that you've got a better chance of making it to the big leagues in that capacity than you do as a pitcher.
That's without a doubt.
Yeah,
without a doubt. Anything else on the? I want to give the Cardinals enough love here. Again, I thought it was a solid draft. I think they also, in the grading here, they get dinged a little bit for the trade. Let's discuss the trade a little bit for Marquise Brown, because I love the trade from the Ravens' perspective. I lauded them for it. Talked about that on yesterday's show, and we talked about the AFC North. I do that all day if I'm the Ravens, even though if I'm the Ravens, I also would love to have a nice speed receiver to replace Marquise Brown. I think the process is sound. What are your thoughts on this process for the Cardinals? They get 1 more year plus the 5th-year option for Marquise Brown in exchange for their first-round pick 23 overall.
Yeah, I think they probably overpaid a little bit, but I get the reasons why they would. I think that when you factor in they're going to be missing their own number 1 receiver for a while, they need to do something, and B, the idea that Marquise Brown is probably a better player for Arizona than he is in Baltimore's offense. Those two things together get me close enough to the value that they had to give up that I think it's okay. It's not a move I would have done necessarily, but I don't hate them for doing it. I don't think it's crazy. I wouldn't hammer the trade the way some other people have.
Some of our guys hate it. We weren't watching the live show, but I heard they went off the rails talking about this.
I mean, Austin hated it.
He
tweeted out that it was terrible or something.
I think it was just more good for the Ravens than it was bad for the Cardinals.
Yeah. But I think you have to factor in the other things in order to see it from Arizona's.
Which is Hopkins,
which is the idea that he is probably a better receiver in their offense than he is the one that he just left.
And then the Kyler factor.
Yeah, exactly. Those are two connected, right? But if you're just looking at what Marquise Brown has been, yeah, it's not worth it. But they're not, right? They're looking at what he can be within their system. And I think those are two different things.
Yeah, the slot, not the gimmick stuff that Rondale Moore does, but the slot receiver in the air raid is going to run a lot of vertical routes. They run slot fades, they run back shoulders off of that, and I think Marquise Brown, if they keep him in the slot, in that particular role, he'll do fine. But even if you move him around a little bit, I think there's value there. Like when you're putting Marquise Brown, AJ Green, and DeAndre Hopkins on the field at the same time, plus say Zach Ertz or Trey McBride, that's solid. I like that. That's a good group. But I think a lot of this draft will come down to obviously Marquise Brown, but I think those 3rd-round defensive linemen, Cameron Thomas, Myjai Sanders, it's a weakness up front for the Cardinals. Losing, they've just lost too many pieces over the last couple of years, and all they have is an aging J.J. Watt. They've got Marcus Golden. Got to get better up front. I think both of those guys can contribute.
And people that hated this draft, one of the criticisms is they didn't address defense enough. And this is a team that their biggest weaknesses are all on the defensive side of the ball, which is, I think, true. But one, they had a very real reason for surrounding Kyler Murray with offense. And two, their defense on paper stank last season, but they vastly overperformed that. So if they can manage that again, it's okay. Like if somehow that secondary in particular, that on paper is not good, repeats what they did a year ago, which we were waiting for the other shoe to drop all season long, and it never did. If they're able to do that again, then it didn't matter that they don't draft a 3rd-round cornerback or whatever.
All right, Los Angeles Rams, they're up next. We just punt?
No.
We just punt on the Rams analysis.
The Rams drafted players, a lot of them, in fact.
The grades are their grades in the consensus grading template here ranged from A to F. Are they the only team that had both an A and an F?
Probably.
The other team, well, because Thor gave an F to the Texans, who ranked 8th on the consensus. The Texans also had...
They have A's.
An A and an F.
A minus. Oh, no, they got an A. They got a real A. John McCain. Hometown, though. That's a bit...
Yeah, on his way out.
Right.
And he usually trashes the Texans.
That's an A minus at best.
He's just throwing him a bone.
Yeah. Who else got an F?
The Rams ranked 30th in the consensus here. Again, because I think most people are just looking at the haul and saying, is this haul of players good, bad, or indifferent, and it's very difficult for someone to look at the Rams haul and be like, oh, look at this, they got all these superstars because they didn't pick till 102.
Miami has an F+ and an A-.
It's a good mix.
Yeah, Chicago has an F and an A-. So there's a few that are close.
Those are the ones that fascinate me. Like the Bengals got one of those Fs last year.
Minnesota has
for
an
Jamar
F.
Chase over Penei Sewell.
Minnesota has an F and an A-.
Well, somebody that really didn't like that trade down in round 1. Where are the Rams picks here? First pick was pick 104, Logan Bruss out of Wisconsin. Jacoby Durant, another athletic corner, much like Robert Rochelle, who they drafted in the middle rounds last year. Athletic corner.
I honestly, by the way, I don't understand any logic that gives them an F. I really don't. Like, it's penalizing them for trading away draft picks that they turned into very good players that won them a Super Bowl. Like how?
Well. Now you can't change your rules here, Sam. You said only on draft night.
Right.
Matthew Stafford trade doesn't count.
100%. But the people giving it an F presumably think it does. Otherwise, you're lit. Like how? Because otherwise, how could you possibly give it an F if you're not counting the picks that they traded away? There's literally no logic in the world that gives it an F.
Yeah. Well, what would you do differently?
Exactly. So the people that give it an F have to be factoring that in, right? Well, they don't have any draft picks. It's like, yeah, but the reason they don't have any draft picks is because they just traded them for a guy who won them a Super Bowl. So you can't give them an F for that because it worked.
Rams draft.
Like, that's ridiculous.
A+.
So if you're factoring in that they traded away their draft picks, it, if anything, enhances their grade. And if you're not factoring it in, then I don't understand what you're doing at all because they drafted some good players. If you look...
I think you're putting too much thought into the lack of thought that people are putting into these draft grades.
If you look at the grade that PFF's draft tracker gave them, which by and large is a reflection of sort of the value relative to the PFF big board, which is tied pretty closely to the value on the consensus board, the first pick is a good grade. Then we have a below average one, another good, a very good, below average, and then a below average and a good. So at the minute, like that's skewing positive, slightly above average overall.
We gave him a C+.
Right, bingo, exactly where it should be, right? I don't get how you give that an F. I really don't.
Maybe you hated the players. Maybe you hate Quentin Lake in the 6th round, who's actually a pretty productive safety out of UCLA. I like that pick. Draft board didn't like it. I liked it. Darian Kendrick comes in. They drafted, we've talked a lot about what is the Rams' strategy. Let's do what the Rams do, the people say. Mm-hmm. What is it that the Rams do? You have astutely made the point. Look, they're going to draft 8 times. They're going to draft 9 times year over year. Yeah, it's going to happen picks 100 through 257. Sure.
Yep.
But they're going to pick a lot. And what have they done?
That's slow as fuck. Okay. Oh, okay. Is this to, like, how is this, are we hanging ourselves? How is this helping us? Jesus, that was dark. I'm sorry. Here on top, the girl, when she sees an item that could be interacted with. Oh, I did not read that. I guess it's hold X or press X. Or hold X. No, please don't do this. You were... I know I've known, like, 8-year-olds. Oh. Oh. Yeah, so Asperger's is interesting. I thought it was all categorized under autism now. Cleared the... That was supposed to happen. That is so fucked up. Okay, because this is the other character, and so I'm guessing we are interacting with that girl's spirit. Is she our, like, best friend? Oh, this is so sad. So on the cover of this, you have these 2 characters, and I thought that you were gonna, like, work together. But I'm wondering if maybe... Oh, no. I'm wondering if maybe, that other girl was, like, our bestie, and so this is us, like, working with her spirit or something. This is that is crazy. The first game was fucked up for the dog death because, like, you kind of caused it, like, on accident. That's, like, that's, like, a spoiler, but it's within the first, like, 5 seconds. What the hell? What? We must be a spirit and she can't see us, right? Haru, sorry I'm late. Oh, yeah, Haru is, it means spring. I only know It's not, like, embarrassing, but it's like a shoujo, you know? Like, I was not well, I was into the romance. I don't know who... Okay, what? I need to know your opinion because I feel like everybody's seen Fruits Basket. But Haru was kind of hot, not gonna lie. I liked Haru because of the androgyny. and me being the androgynous little bitch that I am, because Haru can be male or female name, but I think it means like spring or refreshing. But Haru was he the cow, I think, or like the Taurus? There's something like that. But I found him hot. But also, I wanted her to get with fucking what's his name that was the cat, and I don't remember because I think the anime didn't go on long enough, and I never could find enough of the manga. Oh shit! Why is my aunt calling me? Hold on. My aunt never calls me. This might be serious thingy. So 1 second. I'm so sorry, babies. She's okay. Oh. My poor aunt, she just said she was like driving home and she was bored. I was so worried because she doesn't ever call. She's in like another time zone. Oh, my heart. So worried about my aunt. She's only she's like 12 years younger than my mom. So like we're much closer in age, and so she always kind of raised me like an older sister. And she's super into like K-pop and stuff, and so we just have like a really fun time together. But because of her time zone, she's like driving home right now, I think. And just was like wanting to call and talk, but like she never does that, so I was like, oh my god. Not like that we don't have like a close relationship, she just like time zone wise, she's also like super busy. I won't say what she does, but she is she's got her doctorate in physics. And she's super smart, talking about smart people. And she, like, I'm super proud of her. She's the one who introduced me into, like, anime, and, like, she gave me, I think, like, I always saw her play Final Fantasy X, was, like, super interested. But she gave me Final Fantasy VII, and that's, like, the first Final Fantasy game I played. I think it was, yeah. And she just got me, like, super into everything like that I love, so I'm very grateful. But she partially raised me, but she works in the video games industry as like the head of a huge department for a really, pretty much anybody knows this company and game, I'd say. I've gotten to go on a tour there and stuff. It's really, really great. So I'm just like, I do love her immensely, regardless of that, of course. But that's why I was so concerned, because I just was like, I'm normally the one that calls her because of her time zone. Anyway, get back to this game. So I'm guessing we're Ghost right now is what's going on. But yes, I'm getting back to oh my god, my brain's actually working a little bit again. Maybe the adrenaline of that. But I always wanted her to get with, I can't remember his name, fuck. I almost had it. Is it something with a K? The guy that was a cat, that was like the tsundere type, but I don't know. I need to read the manga and like catch up on like what actually, oh shit, I'm not streaming that. Oops. I need to actually see like what, oh shit. I need to actually see what was fucking, I want to read the manga so I could see what her like end result was with the guys, because I was never into like the rat guy. I don't know, he's not like, I know he's kind of considered androgynous maybe to people, but he's not my type like at all. Just like if anybody comes off kind of posh or like prideful, I'm not into that. And he always pissed me off because he was like mean to his family, but like I get why like everybody in that family's fucked up. Anyway, I'll stop talking about Fruits Basket. That is not what we're streaming. Yui. Or Yui? Yui? Yeah, I guess it would be Yui. Anyway, I don't know what that name stands for. Sorry, did I scare you? Okay, so either a friend can see ghosts, or like, is this before that? Like, what the hell? No, it's okay. Anyway. Yeah, let's go. The fireworks are gonna start soon. Interesting. I fucking hate, I already talked about this with the Ren Fair. I'm not a big fan of fireworks. I just don't like loud sudden noises. Like every other person. Wow, oh my god, sugoi. Desu. Desu? It's a little girl, so I guess you would say desu. Isn't that what it is? You hold out the su if you're a girl. Like, or at least doing like something more femme. If you're gay, you also do that, I think, is the idea. Anyway. Sugoi. Why am I was learning Japanese for quite a while because of someone I dated, because we're gonna move there. I talked about this, I know I've talked about this before. It's just, That's where all of my stupid knowledge comes from, and not actually anime. Just letting you know. I don't actually watch a ton of anime. I watched it as like a little kid, like 10 to 12 a lot. But then I just noticed that a lot of it's very the same. Like, that's an ADHD problem, is like you see patterns and like recognize them really quickly and just can get bored with stuff really easily because of that too. Which is why I love manga a lot more. But today I started watching Hajime no Ippo, and I was thinking, you know what? Because it's only in dub on on all the websites that I'm finding, because I guess it's, it just came out so long ago, sometimes the only stuff that they have for it is in dub. I was like, I will be reading the manga, because old dub and even a lot of new dub, I am not a fan of the voice acting. Anyway, like I said, it already started. And I think everything's... Yes. Sorry, I keep feeling like something's fucked up with that stream. Oh no, you're perfectly fine, because your wife calling you is just in time for my aunt calling me. And you having a wife? Aww, that's fantastic. I just saw, when I went to the Ren Fair, they had all these wedding venues that were like big, wooden building structures, but it was only like the base of it, and it was covered in like ivy. They're very beautiful. Anyhow, but it's so pretty. I think Fruits Basket is a good anime. I think they did a good job of depicting like what was going on in the manga. My public library just did not have enough of the manga series. It had more than what the anime had going on, but not much more. But it was getting also to a point where I don't remember it well, because I was reading it when I was pretty young, but I definitely remember I was like, this incest? What's happening? I was like, what's going on? Some of this is weird. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, same. I like creative writing and everything too, so it's like, sometimes stories can be really hard to get into. A lot of like really popular stories, I would say, amongst friends that I have, I just have to like hold my, bite my tongue. Because I'm like, yeah, you love it, but like, this is a trope and so many other things that it's hard for me to watch. That is the little problem. What's going on? This is gonna be the last time we can watch fireworks together. Oh, is she moving or something? I knew it! I fucking knew it! Like I said, ADHD mind. You're moving away soon. I'm going to be sad when you go. Jesus, I can't read. Okay, so our red character here, she is the one that committed the slide. The suicide. Oof. Yeah, exactly. Super similar stuff, yeah. And also because it's a shoujo, there's gonna be similar tropes, because it's like, they know, also, if you're watching something that's quite old and is really popular, you do have to be aware that oftentimes that's what a lot of newer stuff is based off of. So if you were one of the first shoujos you saw is like Fruits Basket, it's gonna be original to you. And then you watch anything, but if you watch all the stuff you saw before that was new, and then you go to watch Fruits Basket, you're like, oh, this is so derivative. Fucking Frank Reynolds out here, derivative. That's how you're gonna feel. But it's that everything that's new has actually been basing itself off of something that was very popular back in its time. Just like any magical girl anime today is gonna be very derivative of something like Sailor Moon and Madoka Magica, etc. Well, not Madoka. Do I always say Madoka? And I always fucking say Madoka Magica instead of Card Captor Sakura. God damn it. Anyway, the East Guy series. Oh, yeah, pretty prevalent for a while. But there's a reason for that. People, like anime, fantasy, that genre, and like RPGs and everything in general is all about escapism. And I think especially right now, and with the past few years, with
rushers into all of them, because they had that wide zone system. They still went after Clinton Portis. You know what I mean? They weren't happy with this idea of, well, we just take nobodies, cycle through them. They're always looking for the guy. Well, what if the scheme can create this? What if we then find a great running back and plug him into the scheme?
Make it that much better.
It becomes Superman. You know what I mean? So I think and they're not the only team to do this. The Jets went aggressively after a Breece Hall. The Rams keep drafting running backs high. Like, everybody is doing this. It's not that they're all morons, right? So we should probably at least take a beat and question, why are they doing the thing that looks dumb from the outset?
Two things I'm thinking. What if they're just not as confident in their own scheme, but not as self-aware that maybe they're the drivers? Are they aware enough that they're the drivers to this? Or
how could you not be? Like that, the Mike Shanahan thing became, like, everybody knew that.
Here's what I wonder. I'm going to make I'm sorry, I'm going to do it. Another baseball analogy. I was talking to my pitching coach one time.
Okay.
And like when you're pitching, sometimes it's like you don't want to throw the pitch that the hitter's expecting.
Uh-huh.
And my pitching coach pitched in the big leagues for 10 years, made the point, sometimes you give them what they're looking for. Sometimes, like, they know the curveball's coming, they know the slider's coming, but you give it to them. Because what they do is they recognize it, and they're like, oh, I knew it was coming, I knew it. But if you put it in the right spot, if you throw it low, they'll still swing and miss. So just because they know it's coming, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I wonder if the Shanahan system, when they see the running back, they're like, that reminds me of Terrell Davis, or that reminds me of the guy that was great. And they recognize it and they see it. And they're like, when I see it, I got to do something about it. I got to do something. So even though it's at the wrong range, even though it's a low pitch and it's going to curve and I'm going to swing and miss, when I see it, I know it and I recognize it and I need that. I need that in my system. I need my one-cut guy when I see it. That's my best metaphor in a long time. Chalk up a metaphor for me. I'm back to zero.
I was going to say, are you in positive figures yet? Or
that was good, right?
That's just getting it to zero.
They're sitting there in the third round. They're like, Davis Price, he has exactly what we need for the scheme. I recognize it. I see it. Forget the fact that I could turn a guy in the sixth round into the same productive guy. But when I see what I'm looking for, I'm going to pounce.
Yeah, I don't think it's a different skill set that they're looking for. Like, I don't think the problem is that, hey, these other guys have been able to be productive, but what we're really looking for is that prototypical one-cut outside zone runner. I think they're able to find those. What they're looking for is the guy that has that with just a better physical profile and a better body for it, right? Like the thing that separated a Clinton Portis from the other guys that they were able to plug in there was Clinton Portis was like a 220-pound, fast as hell running back. So the Clinton Portis was like an Adrian Peterson physically relative to the other dudes that they've been plugging in there and getting 1,000 yards. And all of a sudden, Clinton Portis does have like a record-setting start to his career to the point where they're able to trade him for Champ Bailey, right? Now, obviously, that's probably not the goal.
That's just great business overall, trading him for Champ Bailey.
That's probably not the long-term goal here, but I do think that, you know, if you listen to a lot of people out there, the general reaction right now is that every time Kyle Shanahan or the Jets or the Rams, like, they make one of these picks and they go after a running back several rounds higher than people thought they should, it's like, oh, well, they're just crazy. Why? What happens? Every now and again, they get to a draft and then they just spasm and they make a crazy running back decision. I mean, they might be picking bad players. The 49ers' track record hasn't been great when they keep doing this. But I think we should at least explore the logic of what they're trying to achieve. Because it clearly isn't that they're just morons, because they're not, right? So what are they trying to get out of these picks? And I think that's what it is. They're trying to get like a superior physical specimen to the dude that's already productive.
I think that combined with my long analogy of they recognize the skill set that they covet. And when they do, they draft it. Even though I think Trey Sermon on the surface probably looks a little different than their traditional running backs. I get what you're saying. This was J.K. Dobbins to the Ravens a couple years ago, right? The Ravens, maybe the smartest organization from a process standpoint, drafted in a year removed from taking Gus Edwards, 2 years removed, as an undrafted free agent, turned him into a 5 yards per carry guy. The Ravens went and drafted J.K. Dobbins, I think with the hopes that he could be a 6 yards per carry guy because he's better in the open field, because he's more explosive into the open field they were going to get him. That part I can kind of buy in, which is why I don't completely hate the Breece Hall thing. I think if you're going to take these swings, make it a Raheem Mostert 4-3 guy. Make it a Breece Hall 4-3-8 guy that if we're going to block it up well and we're going to use misdirection to get this guy into the open space, we have a home run hitter. And again, I don't know if Davis Price is that guy, but I'm just saying theoretically that's where I would go if I'm the Shanahan system. But they draft at least a running back every single year.
That, I think, is the one quibble with this draft. But I think Drake Jackson as our first pick is a phenomenal selection. He could replace Dee Ford pretty quickly. He's got the best dip and bend and pure edge rush move of any of the guys in this draft class. That's a great pick. Danny Gray, we mentioned before, I really like. And then, the low rounds, they've got a couple of interesting players as well. A lot of very goods relative to the PFF draft board, relative to where they were taken.
Kalia Davis.
And then Brock Purdy.
And Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant. Kalia Davis in the 6th round. Big model guy. Production liked him. UCF defensive, interior defensive lineman. He'd be one of the guys that I'd say, hey, day 3, this guy's available still. So
Day 3,
like
the model's identifying this guy.
Yes.
Model identified sleeper.
They've also added a ton of corners. You mentioned our friend Jason Verrett is back. They're taking another shot on the injured Jason Verrett. Ambry Thomas is there, both in backup roles for Emmanuel Mosley and Charvarius Ward. They have a plethora of corners. Added Samuel Womack to the mix from Toledo. So they're attacking this position with volume, I think, more than they have in recent years, because it's been a question mark for the Niners. But team building effort, I think, overall is fine. I wonder if Spencer Burford, the 4th round pick out of UTSA, does he compete for that guard spot? That's the other one too. Like left guard, big question mark who the starter is going to be there. Are they going with last year's Aaron Banks, 2nd round pick? Is he going to be the guy that takes over? We'll see. But I thought they'd attack guard a little bit earlier. I wonder if Burford is that guy at 6'4", 304, their conversion player. But Danny Gray, man, speed to this offense. And a little bit of Debo insurance, at least at the wide receiver position.
Yeah, and of course they kept Debo, which wasn't a guarantee.
They did.
Going into the draft.
There was rumors that they were on the phone at 10 with the Jets.
Yeah, the Jets made an offer. Somebody else made an offer. I forget who. The 49ers claimed none of them came close to what they were looking for.
Who do you think the Giants would have looked at there? Garrett Wilson? Olave? One of those top receivers, I think, to replace Debo.
Mm-hmm.
Would you prefer Garrett Wilson or Debo Samuel right now if you're the Niners?
Oh, right now, Debo. But again, it's always the contract.
Debo
right?
plus the contract, not just the player, right?
Like
the whole situation.
But that's the problem. Like, I think the way this might end up going, if they're as far apart as they seem to be, is, see, I wonder if we're reaching the stage where there's a middle ground of actually the best thing you can do as a team is to play him out for the entirety of the time you can control him in terms of all of his contract, franchise tag, 5th-year option, whatever you have available to you.
Or do you tag and trade at one point?
Or, no, just play out the entirety of the time you can control this guy, and then you let him walk, and you pick the compensatory pickup. The years you got of his value is probably the best thing you can get out of him if you're never going to get that monster contract done, versus trading him where you get rid of the contract issue, but you no longer have the player, or giving him the monster contract, which only a couple of players are going to be worth. So I wonder if the 49ers' best option at this point is to just play out Debo as long as they can control him and then say bye-bye and thank you.
I was going to add something to that, and I can't remember what it was.
Okay.
But they still have Debo Samuel.
They do.
I like that. That's good.
Yeah.
Good.
Uh-huh.
That's what I was thinking. It's not what I was thinking. Oh, this is what I was going to say. A.J. Brown signing for $25 million per year.
Yeah.
Good, bad, and different for the 49ers and for Debo.
I mean, it sets, I think, a fair market for that, right?
We've said, you and I have said, if you got to pay Debo 20, 21, like in that range, it's easier. If he wants 30, like if he wants Devontae or Tyreek Hill money, it's crazy. But even like if I thought A.J. Brown might try to get to 30. He's good. He's at 25. So split the difference there from what we had said. That's a little bit easier to handle with Debo Samuel, I think. 25, even if I'd rather not go that high.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. So $30 million a year. Tyreek's on $30 million a year. Devontae Adams is at like 28, right? DeAndre Hopkins 27 and a bit. A.J. Brown now comes in at 25 average per year. 25, I think, is a reasonable benchmark for where certainly Debo should be aiming, and it's probably a fair. The 49ers are probably going to have to expect to go to 25 if they want to keep Debo around. I think that is a reasonable new benchmark to set from A.J. Brown. Now, if Debo wants 30 and above, I think the 49ers should let him walk, or should do what I just suggested, play out the amount of time you can control him and then let him walk. If he doesn't, then they can get a deal done.
Was the Davis Price, the running back pick, round 3? Debo says he doesn't want to play wide back anymore. Doesn't want to do it. They bring in a 219-pounder, maybe be a little bit more downhill, maybe take the Debo carries. You think it's just a Debo Samuel carry replacement guy? Potentially. Not that they didn't have guys to do that, but
I mean, I think if it is, it's a mistake. Like,
it's an olive branch to Debo Samuel. Look, we're not going to put you in the backfield anymore.
I wouldn't. I mean, I wouldn't really care. You might not want to play there, but you're really good there. So
we're looking for answers. We're looking for answers. Why are the Shanahans? Why is Kyle? Why are the Niners? Why are John Lynch drafting running backs?
Yeah, but it's not just them, right? It's all of these Shanahan trees are all doing the same thing.
I learned from watching you, Dad. Mike.
He generally didn't take them pretty high, except Portis.
Oh, he realized. He's like, I made Terrell Davis a Hall of Famer.
Say Terrell Davis is a 6th rounder.
I made Alandis Gary. I made Mike Anderson. Mike realized. Anyway, Niners ranked low, didn't have a first-round pick, drafted a running back high. It was all right. Solid all around. I think some of those late rounders can contribute. Repeat, rinse, whatever. Seattle Seahawks are up.
Yeah, I was wondering. So Mike Anderson played at Utah in college. And then I was like, why the hell did I think he was in the Army? It's because he was in the Marines.
He was a Marine. That was Mike Anderson, the Marine. That's what it was.
Right.
Yeah. I got it. Seattle Seahawks are up. Where did the people?
I know he just didn't invent like a service history for the man. That would have been strange.
No, I knew he didn't go to Army, but yeah, I was trying to connect those dots as well. Seahawks finished 9th in the composite A- from can't even read. A- from PFF. That's correct. They ranged from A-. Did they have an F too? No, that was the. That was the text. I need a ruler.
It is. They
had a D from Evan Silva.
That is the tricky part about this whole 29 grade composite here. Is it does make it pretty difficult to track the straight lines.
It's too many people. There's too many people here. Pete Prisco's on there. Like Pete was a decent grader. Pete's in the middle of the pack though, so I haven't noticed his a lot. Who did he hate? Pete hated the Bears. Give the Bears a D.
I didn't like the Bears either.
Look at you. What Pete give the Jaguars?
Me and Pete.
Jaguars homer. Anyway, who are we talking about?
Seattle
Seahawks.
They got a lot of A's for their draft.
They did. People didn't hate their running back pick, I guess, all that much as we did. Charles Cross at 9. The top tackle on the PFF draft board goes there. Boye Mafe goes at 40 in the second round, the edge defender out of Minnesota. And then at 41, the second running back off the board, right, was Kenneth Walker out of Michigan State. Goes at 41, was 55 on the PFF draft board. I think the potentially great part of the Seattle draft here, Abraham Lucas in the third round at 72. They needed 2 tackles. Lucas has a chance to step in at right tackle to go with Cross at left tackle. May have immediate upgrades. A couple air raid tackles coming out there too. So I think they'll be a little bit better in pass protection than the run game right away, but they might have 2 starting tackles. Nice explosive edge in Boye Mafe. The running back pick, though, as far as all running back picks, they're questionable, but even more so with Seattle and what they already have on the roster.
Yeah. Having said that, it's like the most Seattle pick ever, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Just random running back thrown in there in the second round.
The very most Seattle pick is Tariq Woolen in round 5. But I really thought, credit the NFL, really thought the NFL might take Woolen in the second round. I thought he might, because he's from UTSA.
You really couldn't watching his tape, though. I mean, I understand why you thought that, but like if when you watch him play,
I've seen worse players go in the second round. But I've never. This is fascinating, by the way. The last 2 years. Quick tangent before we get into the Seahawks. Are we going to start seeing record-breaking workouts every single year? Last year there was no combine. There was just pro days. You had guys like Odafe Owe with Penn State. You had Micah Parsons. Like, we have rarely seen workouts as great as Owe's at edge, Micah Parsons at linebacker, right? Everybody's running fast. This year, you have Trayvon Walker, maybe with the best edge all-around workout we've ever seen. Tariq Woolen, other than the 3-cone, the most absurd size, speed combination I think we've ever seen at corner. 6'4", running a 4.26 40. I just wonder if this is a workout thing, just better athletes the same way in other sports. The athletes are getting better. I won't name the sports, but other sports, guys might be throwing balls harder or whatever it might be, faster than ever. Tariq Woolen had one of the most absurd cornerback workouts of all time at 6'4", running a 4.26. That's insane. But he had a 65 coverage grade last year. He's a converted wide receiver, but he went in the 5th round, 153 overall. Great place to take that type of projection in Tariq Woolen. I just thought that the NFL might get blinded by the workout, take him in the 2nd round.
Yeah, I mean, the tape I think was bad enough that I was reasonably confident he wasn't going to get drafted that high. Now, 5th round still feels like I'm surprised he lasted as long as the 5th round. I think that's where he should have lasted, but I'm surprised somebody didn't jump on the physical tools higher than that. But yeah, like as you said, a 6'4", 200+ pound guy that can run a 4.2. That's you take that in the 5th round, even if he can't play.
With ridiculous arm length too, like everything was insane.
Yeah. So
about
grab a guy like that in the 5th and just see what you can make out of him.
Absolutely.
Even if it's not a corner, whatever. Like, let's figure that out. That's too valuable a skill set to just let drop entirely. So sure, what the hell? Charles Cross at number 9, the 3rd of the tackles that was taken, a guy that was the 1st of the tackles on some boards, including PFF's. That's got to be a good pick. The only interesting part is it means they were the first team, or not the first team, I guess Carolina. They were the next team up that didn't take the quarterback in the top 10 when they could have. Remember, Drew Lock is their starter right now.
Yep.
Drew Lock, then Geno Smith. Effectively, they don't have a quarterback. They didn't take one in the top 10. They took Charles Cross, and when you see what happened with the rest of the quarterback class, that at least appears to be a smart decision. Then you get to the 2nd round. Boye Mafe, one of those impressive edge rushers at the top of the 2nd round. I think that's a good pick as well. Right after, Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker's a good running back, but you have 2 good running backs already, one of whom you just re-signed after a former first-round pick that you just re-signed after tearing it up the last, 6 games of the season. So one of those moves is a mistake. You know what I mean? Either the Kenneth Walker move is a mistake, or re-signing Rashad Penny to any kind of contract was a mistake.
It was just for a year, and the chat's claiming that maybe Chris Carson's not going to be playing football going forward based off whatever, injuries and everything that he's dealt with. Rashad Penny's only a 1-year deal. He's been banged up. Fine. Even if Kenneth Walker becomes your starting running back, my bigger issue is the spot this guy's being taken, right? I'm somewhat justifying the Jets move because you're looking at how they maneuvered their roster over the last couple of years, in part thanks to the Seattle Seahawks. They've added all these pieces, right, to where the Jets don't have any egregious holes on the roster. Seattle still, maybe they fixed their offensive line, but I think they could have used another edge to go with Boye Mafe. They need more pass rushers. Their linebackers are young, inexperienced as far as, but they're banking on the youth there. They just have other holes on the roster, including quarterback, including you probably want to upgrade from Drew Lock. So that'd be Kenneth Walker's a good player, man. He's a good player. He's patient. Mm-hmm. I was surprised at how fast he ran, but you could see him break away at times at Michigan State. I like what Renner said when Michigan State made their incredible comeback against Michigan, Kenneth Walker taking over the game. There's a lot to like about Kenneth Walker as a player. I just don't want to take running backs unless they're the cherry on top, and we're just not at that point of the Sunday here for the Seahawks.
Not at that point in the Sunday. I really like the draft overall. Even down Bo Melton in the 7th round, I think is one of the best values in the entire draft. In fact, I just wrote him up as the best pick of the 7th round in an article. We talked about Tariq Woolen, how that's great gambling at that point in the draft. Abraham Lucas could be a starter in round 3. Kobe Bryant, I think, is an interesting corner in the 4th round.
Nice difference between Bryant and Woolen. Bryant's got some pretty good production numbers coming out of Cincinnati, not as good of an athlete, but I like that diversification.
And we like Kenneth Walker, even if it feels like at that point in the draft they had bigger problems to address than Kenneth Walker at running back. The only caveat to this draft, and it was the one I was using with Carolina in terms of mock draft before the draft, if you're not going to take a quarterback at 6, I need to know what your quarterback plan is, right? Because you have Sam Darnold right now. That's not a starter. That just isn't in today's NFL. Carolina ends up trading back into the 3rd, grabs Matt Corral. So whatever you think about that, that's their answer, right? They've at least got a direct competition now between Matt Corral and Sam Darnold, and they will be obviously praying desperately that Matt Corral can win that and can show something better than Darnold has. Seattle didn't do anything. They didn't take a quarterback at all. So you still have Drew Lock and Geno Smith as your starters on a roster that isn't great. And okay, you made some moves to make that roster better. You got maybe 1, maybe 2 tackles. You got an edge rusher. You got a running back. but you still have Drew Lock as your starter. Like Drew Lock had last year's Denver team was an Aaron Rodgers away from a Super Bowl was the narrative, right? So they had one of the best rosters in the NFL, and Drew Lock looked like one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. Seattle's roster is a lot worse than Denver's, and Drew Lock is still Drew Lock. So what's your quarterback answer?
Is it Baker Mayfield?
I mean,
potentially.
It probably
do they
should
still have
be.
something in the works for Jimmy Garoppolo, allegedly? I think I think Seattle does have a lot of holes on the roster. My point on the Jets is they not that the Jets maybe have a better roster, but it looks like a better roster outside of quarterback. And if they don't have a hole, they at least have a young player that's expected to fill that in New York. Seattle last year drafted 3 times, right? And you got Trey Brown, you got Stone Forsythe, and you got Dwayne Eskridge. Trey Brown had contributed the most. So you're 1 year removed from only drafting 3 players. This year, they drafted a lot more, and it looks like they've added to the roster, and you have to balance that out with another high-volume year. And that's why I just think it's so difficult to just add running backs when your roster has a lot of holes, top to bottom. And even at receiver, where I love DK, obviously love DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, DK's got to get paid soon. Are you going to pay him? Are you going to let him walk? You just need more depth. You need someone else to compete with Dwayne Eskridge for wide receiver 3. Maybe Bo Melton is that guy. So I do like a lot of the picks that Seattle brought or got later, but a running back that high, just really difficult for the Seahawks given where this roster is right now.
Yeah. But otherwise, I mean, overall, it's a good draft.
It was a good draft. It was a good draft overall. And it was needed, because of the holes that we're talking about, because they only drafted 3 times last year. One more thing, though. Even if you like Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas, and we said, hey, that's great. They're your starters at tackle. What are we getting excited about as Seahawks fans, right? If you're a Seahawks fan, is it a lateral move at tackle? Like, are they actually going to... Dwayne Brown moves on, coming off his worst season, but is Charles Cross going to be better than Dwayne Brown next year? Is Abraham Lucas going to be better than Brandon Shell next year? Probably not. It's actually going to be a step back, most likely, from those guys. Doesn't mean they're not the better long-term play, but in the short term, I think we have to accept the Seahawks team is getting worse before it's getting better.
Yeah, but those are just moves you have to make. Like
you have to make them all, but I'm saying things are going to look worse this year, I think, for the Seahawks than they did last year.
Things are going to look worse
when they weren't that good.
Things are going to look worse because you don't have Russell Wilson at quarterback. And even Russell Wilson wasn't good enough to drag this roster to respectability last year.
If you plopped Russ on this roster right now, as bad as they were last year, this is still the worst roster that they've had.
Probably, but
in the Russell Wilson era.
The defining point about the Seahawks right now is that they have no quarterback, and they had to make the rest of the roster better because the thing had fallen to rack and ruin. Dwayne Brown was the best player on that offensive line, was a major step back for him last year at age 36, going to be 37 this season. So you probably can't expect him to be as good as he was again. So you got to find his replacement. And okay, that guy's probably not going to be as good as Dwayne Brown in year 1 because that's the standard offensive line development curve, but that's the move you need to make.
And that's fine. I get it.
And that's also why smart teams do things like that a year before they need to, right? So that the guy is ready to step in and be Dwayne Brown right when you need him to be. But Seattle didn't. They've had a sequence of not great drafts, and that's why the roster isn't in good shape.
This does have a chance to be their best draft in a while. So I do like it overall. But, yeah, still some questions, I think. I do think they believe in Drew Lock. Or just didn't believe in the other quarterback.
I really hope not. I mean, look, they've been talking him up to an unreasonable degree since they got him. Talking about how they loved him at draft time, blah, blah, blah. Look, there's something to be said for new environments, change of scenery, all that kind of jazz. On the other hand, you simply haven't seen almost anything from Drew Lock since he's played in the NFL to suggest that he can be a viable starter going forward. The great big-time throw rate from year 2 disappeared last year. Minimum playing time, but he didn't have a ton of big-time throws last season. The turnover-worthy play rate has remained high throughout his entire career. I mean, what are we expecting to see that's different?
I'm more intrigued by Mitch Trubisky data points than Drew Lock data points. That's all I know.
Yeah. There's no reason to be excited about Drew Lock. There really isn't. His play has been remarkably consistent in the NFL, even if the statistics haven't been.
As Baker apologists, or at least ones that recognize he's had 2 good NFL seasons out of 4, and that there's still hope for the future, what are your thoughts if Baker Mayfield was plopped into this Seattle Seahawks roster?
I mean, first and foremost, Baker Mayfield would be a huge upgrade over Drew Lock.
Agreed.
Secondly,
Baker's worst season has been better than Drew Lock's best season.
Yes. Secondly, Baker Mayfield would be a pretty big downgrade from Russell Wilson.
Also true.
And as we just said, the roster is probably worse than it was a year ago, even though they just had a good draft because they're all going to be rookies.
So they're battling.
Yeah. So Baker Mayfield on this Seattle team gives them their best chance to win. Their chance still isn't great.
I'd be intrigued by that to see if Pete Carroll, John Schneider, can they extract the best out of Baker Mayfield.
Seattle is
just give it a shot for a year. If not, you're back in the QB market.
Seattle, to me, is genuinely the one team that should be willing to trade something for Baker Mayfield. Because, so look, Baker Mayfield goes from an $18 million problem that teams don't want to take on, right, to, if he's cut, it's a very, very cheap deal that most of the league should be interested in bringing in at the very minimum as a backup. So
it's honestly not that much different than bringing in Jameis Winston. Right?
Yeah, but my point being, Seattle goes from a marketplace of 1 to a marketplace of who the hell knows how many, but like 12 teams if he gets cut. If they want to ensure they get Baker Mayfield, it might cost them $18 million to do that. And they might be the one team that it's actually worth it. Now, the complicating factor there is you might say, well, maybe Baker's only interested in starting gigs. So even if he's cut, he's only interested in a couple of teams. Maybe Seattle thinks that's true, and that's why they're not willing to trade for him. Because if they're like, if we just stay patient, they're going to have to cut him because that dude will be toxic as hell in that environment because they just like pulled the rug out from under him in Cleveland.
Yeah.
They're going to cut him. And if they cut him, he's only going to want to come here or maybe Carolina if he thinks he can compete for that job. That's about it, right? Nobody else is going to give him a shot to start. So we can just we can still pick him up for hardly anything.
Should the Seahawks at least have been one of the teams that took a shot on one of those QBs? You got nothing to lose on Desmond Ridder, Malik Willis, and all that stuff.
Look, when
you were talking about them, are they going to take him at 9? Are they going to take him at 40, 41? They didn't even take one shot on the quarterbacks. Even if you don't like them, take a shot. Because also one of them could come in and be better than Drew Lock immediately.
I mean, we said we love the Abraham Lucas pick. On the other hand, you could have had the second quarterback off the board at that point. Like that, Desmond Ridder went 2 picks after that. Malik Willis.
Ridder or Malik Willis.
Right, Malik Willis hadn't gone yet.
Yeah.
People were saying Seattle could take Malik Willis at 9. Obviously, I don't know why I keep bringing this up. Everything people said about the quarterbacks pre-draft apparently was unmitigated horseshit.
It's one of those, like, the consensus board I'll still kind of buy into. I think all of our pre-draft quarterback takes and where they might go, I think, are all invalid now.
But the point being, you could have taken the second available quarterback, which on a lot of people's boards could have been the first quarterback. You know? Like, if you didn't have Pickett ranked number 1, you could have had the number 1 quarterback available on your board, and you could have got him in the 3rd round.
Yep.
So, to me, I think they should have rolled the dice on a quarterback at that point in the draft.
Yeah, I think that's my only issue with it is the opportunity cost, drafting a running back, not drafting a quarterback. I think that's what may have been left on the table. Overall, I like the haul, though, for the Seahawks. I think it's important for the franchise, and I think they moved in the right direction. The consensus also agrees. Number 9 draft for them. Mm-hmm. All right, let's go on the Atlanta Falcons. They're number 7 as far as the draft goes. PFF giving them an A, but number 7 in the consensus. I thought the Falcons did a nice job. They just picked, they picked good players at the spots they were given.
They drafted good players.
They drafted good players when they should have drafted them. How's that? Drafting players.
I think this was one of the best drafts of anybody.
Even with your number 4 wide receiver being their first pick.
Yeah, because because I don't think there's necessarily a wrong order for that first group of wide receivers. It's more the type of receivers they are. Like, Arizona traded for a wide receiver that's 5'9", 180 pounds, right? Atlanta is going after receivers that are 6'5", 6'4", big-bodied, contested catch guys. These are completely different players that even if they technically are both wide receivers, do not play the same position. Garrett Wilson, Drake London, these guys are not the same. They're not playing the same position. They're both designated wide receivers, but they're not playing the same position in an offense. So if you want a specific role, you're not drafting Garrett Wilson number 1, or you're not drafting Drake London number 1. Depends what you're looking for. So I don't think there was necessarily a wrong way of organizing that first group of wide receivers. So for them to take Drake London as their number 1, fine. No problem with that. Arnold Ebiketie in the second round.
Love that.
Great value. Like 38 overall, they get a guy who had phenomenal PFF grades, has great technique, fundamentals, is a great athlete as well. As you've pointed out before, is one of those guys that gets overshadowed because all the attention was on what a freaky athlete Trayvon Walker was. So nobody paid any attention to like any other good athletes in the draft. But Ebiketie is definitely one of them. Troy Anderson from Montana State, the first of the Montana State players to be drafted.
One of your favorites here.
Well, a linebacker, but a linebacker that played running back and quarterback and lined up at wide receiver, just played wherever the hell they needed him to at Montana State.
Football player.
Yeah, legitimately. And then goes to the combine and runs like a 4.4 flat. And again, another fantastic athlete. And then they're the team in the third round to take the shot on a quarterback. They get Desmond Ridder. I think that's a great gamble to take in the third round. And then it just kept going. Like they drafted good players all the way down this draft.
D'Angelo Malone, Juice on the outside, Tyler Algier, could come in and just they released Mike Davis, right?
So he immediately has a path to like a starting position on that, or at least a split backfield with Cordero Patterson.
Behind Cordero Patterson. I mean, that is Algier's not. I mean, he averaged 4.4 yards after contact per attempt. I don't think he's not the most explosive guy, big play guy. He just kind of gets what's there type of player, but that's what we're always expecting.
The new Thomas Jones?
Maybe. No, the model liked him, so it'll be a little better than Thomas Jones.
How do you know the model wouldn't like Thomas Jones?
The model would have Thomas Jones as the most mediocre player. You know that. Thomas Jones, Dontrell Inman, it would have him at perfectly dead smack average. Not Algier. Their first 6 picks can all play. Or Desmond Ridder be the developmental quarterback.
Right.
So there's a lot to like about this. Contributors, linebacker that hasn't figured it out yet, and Anderson, 2 edge rushers at a position where they need a better pass rush, lowest pressure percentage in the NFL last year.
By a distance.
And then Drake London at receiver. That now gives them Drake London, monster, contested catches, gets open too for a big guy. Kyle Pitts, basically a receiver that they call a tight end.
A huge receiver.
Biggest catch radius in the NFL, potentially, Kyle Pitts. Auden Tate's also just chilling on that roster, too. He's like, what people describe Drake London as, except Tate really can't get open. Like, he really is just a contested catch guy. But this is, and then Damiere Byrd, so you get your small, fast guy in Zacchaeus. But mostly, this is a get off the bus, 6'4 plus team. That's what they're trying to build. That's what they're doing. Like the Jags back with that group that we've talked about a few times.
Yeah. I like the draft. I think it was good. One of the best drafts.
Good draft, Falcons.
Good draft. I gave him an A.
Marcus Mariota. So what do you think happens with Marcus Mariota, Desmond Ridder here? Is Mariota the guy for the whole season? How would you treat your third-round quarterbacks, your Desmond Ridders of the world? It's going to be different in Tennessee, where Malik Willis is the backup. And they might actually try to get him on the field because he's such a good athlete. Who knows? But in Atlanta, it's different, right? You have a short contract for Marcus Mariota. He's not the future of the Atlanta Falcons unless he has a Ryan Tannehill-like rejuvenation to his career. Do you treat Ridder the same way you would a first-round pick? Like, hey, whenever he's ready, you go.
I think Mariota gets the start, and then you give Desmond Ridder enough reps in practice that you can actually give him any kind of evaluation. And then if he surprises you, like if you're like, oh, wow, this guy's actually way better than we thought he was when we valued him as a third-round pick, then all of a sudden you are thinking about, well, what is his path to starting? But if he shows you nothing, then he's just another third-round pick that didn't work out. He's Kellen Mond.
Atlanta, a weird team where they probably won a lot more games than they should have last year based off how they
knew that.
Yeah, they knew that. But then they have additions like Casey Hayward. Casey Hayward's like that guy. Like, he should be going to contending teams every year as a 1-year option to fill a hole or whatever. But all of a sudden you pair him with AJ Terrell. It's a decent group of corners. If a couple of these pass rushers do hit and they improve there, You add Drake London to that receiving core. Of course, you're losing. You don't have over the last couple of years. You've lost Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, and Russell Gage. So that needed to be rebuilt from the ground up. You got Drake London though, and Kyle Pitts as your guys. Cordero Patterson as your movable chess piece on the offense. And no more Matt Ryan, of course. You got Marcus Mariota. It's an intriguing team. A lot of turnover at key spots for the Falcons. But I think the roster was in full rebuild mode, and this draft certainly moves them in the right direction.
Yeah, this was step one of a major rebuild, or I guess step two after trading away Matt Ryan being step one. You're not going to get a much better step two. Like, this is a really good really good draft on the back of a free agency where they can't do a ton because they're buried in dead cap money, having traded away Matt Ryan. This is as good as you're going to get.
Anything else you want to add here?
No, I mean, you could, I guess, quibble that if you're drafting a quarterback of this group, and he's not going to start right away, certainly, because you got Marcus Mariota in the third round, they're effectively all developmental quarterbacks at that point. If you're taking a developmental guy,
Malik Willis, you're saying?
Well, Malik Willis, whoever, surely it's not Ritter. You know what I mean? Like, Ritter's selling point is he's the most pro-ready of the group. It's probably not that he has the highest upside with a year of development. And I mean, look, they drafted Ritter, I think, in the third round. It's great value, whatever. That's a question I would ask, that if you're drafting a third-round quarterback, the guy doesn't need to start. They're all developmental options, at which point, what makes you think that Ritter is that guy to have? I would like Atlanta beat writers, if you're out there listening, I would like somebody to ask them that question. Why is Desmond Ritter the best developmental quarterback you could select at number 74?
They'll just define developmental differently.
But I think it's a question.
Reads the offense fast, so therefore he'll read it faster at some point. You know, like people look at that.
That's not, I mean, that's not developing. It's just, that was like Mac Jones, right? You come in, you read the offense really fast, faster than anybody else, and now you can start. Bang. You're good.
Yeah, but he could get better at that stuff too.
Right, but like the big question with Mac Jones right now is how good can he get? We know he's good at the stuff that he was good at. He's still good at that. Where's his ceiling? We still have no idea. But the advantage that Ritter brings to the table is being able to get thrown in there week one and not die. He's not going to get thrown in there week one, so what's the advantage he's bringing to the table?
You're the best. The advantage is he can get thrown in week one and not die.
Yeah.
I mean, there's skill. I mean,
there is, but my point is they're not using that skill because he's almost certainly not going to start.
Understood. I'm curious to know if the Falcons in particular look at treat Ritter like a first-round prospect, and when he's ready, it's his time. Because they are in rebuild, and again, unless Marcus Mariota looks a lot better than he did the last time he started with the Titans, then they probably want to see that development from Ritter, a guy that some people thought could go in the first round, even though the NFL as a group did not value him there. All right, let's go Carolina Panthers here. The Panthers, where did they end up here?
Pretty high.
Dead smack in the middle.
Really?
17th. Tied for 17th with the Chargers as far as GPA goes. We gave them an A, though.
I like this draft.
We gave the Panthers an A. There's not... If we had more Panthers fans, they would probably call you a Panthers hater. I don't think we have enough fans to rail against your railing against the Panthers, but you're giving them some compliments here as far as their draft.
Well, this feels like another one where if you're heavily downgrading this draft, it's simply because you're downgrading trading away draft picks. Now, yes, that's an easier argument to make for the Panthers than it is the Rams because they traded away draft picks for the likes of Sam Darnold or Stephon Gilmore, who's no longer with the team. You know, they didn't make a good use of their draft picks that they pissed away. The Rams traded their draft picks for people that won them a Super Bowl. So it's hard to say, well, they don't have any picks, so it's an F. Like, what? Look where they went. Whereas with Carolina, it's like, yeah, okay, it's a fair point. We used those draft picks for Sam Darnold, and that didn't go well. So I guess I can at least see that case.
Third rounder for C.J. Henderson.
But it still feels harsh to me to downgrade a team's draft for the things they did years ago.
Yeah, no, I get it.
A year ago.
So they got Ike Ekwonu at 6.
So based off what they had, which was a pick at 6 and then not a pick again until 137, they came away with Ike Ekwonu, who was in the running to go number 1 overall for periods of this pre-draft process, who was a lot of people's number 1 tackle on the board. Was he number 3 for us?
I think he was 2. I think Evan Neal was 3.
Okay. But either way, there was that
Neal was one on my board.
There was that top 3 group of tackles, all of whom were very closely arranged, and I think you could fairly say that Ike Ekwonu was number 1 on a lot of people's boards, if not most. So they came away with him as their number 1 pick, and then it's a waiting game. Now you got to sit there and wonder what's going to happen with these quarterbacks, because that was your big problem. That was your opportunity to draft a quarterback. You didn't do it. Now you got to sit there and see what happens.
They didn't have a pick until, 106?
137, I think, was their first pick.
137. They traded back up into the third round to number 94 to get Matt Corral.
Yeah. So then they get towards the end of the third round, and they go, okay, that's far enough. Let's go make a move. And they jump up. They grab Matt Corral at 94. You trade up to get him, so it's not as good as if you'd managed to get him all the way at 137, but whatever. To come out of this draft with Ike Ekwonu, a lot of people's number 1 tackle, and an answer at quarterback. Doesn't even matter what the answer is, just something that isn't Sam Darnold.
A non-Darnold answer.
Right. I think immediately makes this a decent draft. Then you've got, you got a 4th round pick, you got a 6th, a few 6th, and you got a 7th. I think they added interesting players at that point. So I don't see how you can come away with the conclusion this is anything other than a good draft.
My question is, if the quarterbacks went when we thought, which was 1 in the top 10 and maybe 2 sneaks in, but there's 2 or 3 in the first. There's a couple fall to the second.
The over-under was 2.5 quarterbacks in the first.
Yeah.
And most people were taking the over.
We had legit debates, do a couple of these teams take them in the top 10 and one falls late first, somebody trades back in or whatever.
People expected Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis, and another to go in the first round. Maybe Desmond Ridder, maybe Matt Corral, whatever it is. That was the expectation. And obviously that looks absurd post-draft. But even, remember, our round 1 recap podcast was like, oh, what the hell happened? Only 1 quarterback in the first round. How far are these guys going to fall? And you were like, none of them are going to fall to day 3, right? It's like, that seemed absurd at the time.
First I said round 3. I was like, we're talking about, some of these guys are going to go round 3, and realistically they went, Sam Howell goes round 5.
Right. That seemed insane that they could last till day 3, and then Sam Howell lasts all the way to the top of the 5th round. So what everybody thought about the quarterbacks seems ridiculous with hindsight. But for Carolina to come out of this with Matt Corral, who was a player a lot of people thought was a first round prospect in terms of where he would be selected, not in terms of abstract, first round grade, but was, quarterback 3, 4 in this draft class. It's good.
So, yeah, the idea of getting Matt Corral in the 3rd round's fine. Here's my concern with this whole thing. You have Sam Darnold as your starter, and now the backup is Matt Corral, the guy that the NFL valued as a 3rd rounder. You traded up to go get Matt Corral. Had the quarterbacks gone in the 1st round when we had expected and the Panthers got one of them or whatever, isn't that an easier...
You're like, you're making my argument back to me.
No, I'm saying you're going to have a lot more confidence if the entire NFL valued these quarterbacks as 1st and 2nd round picks and you got one of them, right? Whether it was at 6 or through a trade down or whatever it is. Name a quarterback. Doesn't matter. Let's pretend it's Matt Corral. 1st round pick. Now it's like, all right, we have our 1st round pick, Matt Corral, who we evaluated as such, and the NFL did as well or whatever. And, he's the guy. It's going to be his job at some point. But now what you have is a quarterback that the NFL didn't value before pick 94, you traded up to get because somewhat out of desperation, who you didn't value enough to take at 6, obviously, and you think he's worse than Sam Darnold, basically. You think he's worse than Sam Darnold. You're stuck with Sam Darnold right now. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think the Panthers are in this middle ground, unless Matt Corral becomes Dak Prescott as hey, the dude's he's just got it right away. You are stuck in this middle ground. If you come out with no quarterback, you're like, man, I don't want to roll into the season with Sam Darnold again. I will look at Baker Mayfield. I will look at Jimmy Garoppolo, and there's a play to be made there, at least for the short term. Now you're in this, Sam Darnold's the guy right now. Sam Darnold is the starter for the Panthers because of this move.
I think this is an open competition from day 1.
Yeah, Sam Darnold's better than Matt Corral. Maybe. Everyone else is. I think most people would evaluate Sam Darnold as better than Matt Corral. Now, based off what we know in the draft.
I mean, the problem with Matt Corral was not that we know he sucks. It's that we really don't know what he is because he ran an RPO offense and we had no earthly idea whether he can read defense.
Oh, chances are he's not ready right away.
Probably.
This sounds very Sam Darnold-ish, too. You had a 91 PFF grade through week 7, and then that was 4th highest, and then that dropped 20 grading points to 70 for the rest of the season. I mean, that was Darnold ebb and flow that he had at USC.
But Corral is an unknown rather than a bad, which is different to Darnold, who's a bad.
Look, I'm not saying it's bad to have Matt Corral on the team. I think it's great to have him in the 3rd round. I'm glad that the Panthers got someone. All I'm saying is I don't think they're exploring Baker Mayfield, Jimmy Garoppolo, insert whatever potential quarterback might be available now because they have Matt Corral and Sam Darnold. And that the likelihood is it's most likely that Sam Darnold is the starter for the Carolina Panthers. So the thing that you hate the most is Sam Darnold playing quarterback for the Panthers. This draft solidified that is the most likely scenario for the 2022 Carolina Panthers. Whereas if they did not draft a quarterback and they let all of these guys fall and said, we don't love any of them, that's fine, then I think they're going back to the free agent well and trading well and trying to figure something out.
If they didn't draft a quarterback, I think they could easily have talked themselves into starting Darnold again for a year.
Just said, tank it.
Well, not even tank it. Just say, well, look, if I remember correctly, Sam Darnold was 3-0 last year when we had Christian McCaffrey and everything was going well before the offensive line fell apart and blah, blah, blah. I think they could easily talk themselves down the diluted road that, like, Sam Darnold just got unlucky last year, just the way he got unlucky for the first few years of the Jets and, in USC when he was bad. Like, it was all Sam Darnold is the unluckiest quarterback in the face of the planet, and 2022 will be different. 2022 will finally catch a break, and we will get the good Sam Darnold that Dan Orlovsky has been talking about for years. That's what's going to happen. I think they could have talked themselves into that. So they didn't. They grabbed a quarterback, and I always say,
in the 3rd round, they could still talk. They could still have that same conversation.
Right. But so I think where you draft a quarterback matters if you had the full complement of draft picks, right? So this is where I think it gets complicated because if you take a quarterback at round 1, he's your presumptive future starter. He is going to get an opportunity at some point, right? Unless he absolutely stinks immediately, and it takes you like 48 hours to realize that you made a terrible mistake. Only the store won't take him back, If you take him in the 2nd round,
the store won't take him back.
The 2nd round, I think, is where it gets awkward because we've talked up. That's where you should take a Drew Lock, right? That's where you should take a Daniel Jones. That's where you should take those guys that have NFL tools, but you're not massively confident in it because there's something missing or the play has never been quite there, blah, blah, blah. That's where you take those guys. But if you do take them in the 2nd round, they have less opportunities, you have less invested in them, and everybody knows that you don't really think they're that good. It's different. Like Daniel Jones taken at 6, immediately we were giving the Giants crap for it because you're like, well, you're overdrafting that guy by 20 picks minimum, probably closer to 40. But for Daniel Jones, it's great. Like, the Giants love me. I'm going to get a couple of years starting here. I get the chance to show that I can lead Big Blue back to the promised land. Whereas Drew Lock is never thinking that for Denver. Drew Lock is like, maybe I can fight my way to an opportunity, and if I play well, I can ball out and I can get this job. But he's not like, this is my team. I'm going for it. I'm going to be the guy. So there's a difference between drafting that guy in the 1st or the 2nd round. And there's probably a difference again between the 2nd round where you're like, developmental guy may get a shot, to the 3rd round where it's like, you're a backup, and if you get lucky, you might get on the field, right? But that difference changes if you didn't have the 2nd rounder and you didn't even have the 3rd rounder. You had to make a move to make that happen because the options were, we draft you at 6, and look, we love you, son, but you're not that good. We draft you at 6, or we're going to grab you whenever the hell we can the next time it comes up. And we made the move up to get you in the 3rd round. You're as good as you're going to get in terms of giving us a shot at a quarterback, but you weren't worth 6 overall. I think there's a vast difference in like everybody's perception about this signing, this draft pick, than if they just had a 2nd pick and drafted him there.
Yeah, so I get it. I'm less talking about the psychology of the player or the team or the pick or anything like that. I guess I'm kind of leaning on the wisdom of the crowd's deal and the consensus stuff and everything. If the consensus or the big board or whatever doesn't value these quarterbacks and you got one as an afterthought, then you're gonna roll with Sam Darnold.
But he was 44 on the consensus board.
It's fine.
So
I'm
mid-2nd round pick.
That's fine. Corral's fine as a prospect. Like, I think he's gritty and he's going to go out there and make some throws under pressure and do some stuff. Like, he might be fine.
From a consensus
I'm just
board
saying,
standpoint.
I think this is revealing that the Panthers and the NFL valued him at this point. And maybe the Panthers didn't really have the opportunity to get him.
Right.
But the rest of the NFL valued him at this point, which is a data point, that the rest of the NFL doesn't value Corral that high, which makes me think maybe he's not going to challenge Sam Darnold, which makes me think the Panthers, because they got someone else, aren't going to make a move for a different quarterback, which isn't going to save the franchise anyway. But in the short term, I think the Panthers are going Sam Darnold. I think it just kind of locks in Sam Darnold as their starter.
I think that,
Whereas if they took Pickett at 6, it's like, well, it's Kenny Pickett's team whenever he's ready.
Of course, but that's drafting a quarterback at 6. He's essentially Drew Lock from a consensus standpoint. A consensus board standpoint. He was the 44th overall prospect.
And it's a steal. It's a steal in the 3rd round to get Matt Corral.
Right. And even if he's slightly lower than that, right? Even if the consensus board was higher on him than the rest of the league, he is that type of prospect. And that type of prospect is walking onto a team that has a terrible starter. So at the very minimum, he is going to be given an opportunity to win that job. Now, if he doesn't win it, he doesn't win it. But there's no way the Panthers are looking at this and going, sorry, Matt, this is Sam's job here. That guy's going to be difficult to unseat. You're going to have to show something pretty special for us to make that move, or even adjust the snaps in training camp. You're going to have to really show us something, really open our eyes for us to adjust this situation. They have got this dude sitting there. They would be desperate to get off the chair. So if Matt Corral throws one good pass in training camp, he's going to get given a shot with the ones. If he doesn't throw 3 interceptions in a row, he's going to get an even split of snaps. He's going to be given every possible chance to win that job, and then it's up to him whether he's got that in him in year 1.
Yeah, I like the move. You're right. Maybe Matt Corral has a spot. I think the Panthers are going to lean on Sam more than you think. I know you liked Amari Barno, the 6th rounder, really fast edge defender, runs a 4.36. They got some athletes at the end. Kalen Barnes, the Baylor corner. Obviously, Matt Rule's got connections there with Baylor. 4.23, 40-yard dash. So they went with some athletic projections, basically the whole day 3. Brandon Smith out of Penn State, linebacker, who another 90th percentile 40, broad and short shuttle. That'll be fun to watch. As a lot of teams, I think some teams lean heavily on the day 3 athletic projections, but this is almost every pick here is the way the Panthers went.
There are definitely teams that sort of go, well, look, once you're in the 5th, 6th, and 7th round where nobody pans out, you might as well take a guy that's a freak athlete and hope that you can teach him how to play football. Of the 3, there were 3 corners that had absurd athletic profiles. There was Tariq Woolen, who we talked about to the Seahawks in the 5th round. There was Zion McCollum, who went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers a few picks later, I think also in the 5th round. And then Kalen Barnes, who had the 4.23, but also had a 40-inch vertical, 11-foot broad jump. I think Barnes is the best corner of the 3.
Yep.
They're all freak athletes, but this is the one that's actually a half-decent football player in addition to the freak. And he went 2 rounds later. So I love that.
No, I agree. So there is a lot to like about the Panthers draft. Can't wait to see the opportunity Matt Corral gets as a 3rd-round pick. You have an opportunity to get 25% off, by the way. NFL Pod, it's the promo code. Any PFF subscription, 25% off. Of course, you have all of our unlocked content. You get the grades, the stats, the fantasy projections, the gambling stuff. It's all there. It's all in the PFF subscriptions. Use the promo code NFL Pod, 25% off any subscription right now. You can get the monthly. You can get the 365 days of access. Just use NFL Pod. Get 25% off. Saints and Bucks left here. Let's go Saints. Wow, what a power move to go get Chris Olave. So coming in, we were theorizing, is it quarterback? Is it quarterback? We took a step back and said, maybe it's just to fill the needs at receiver and left tackle, and that is exactly what the Saints did with all of that draft capital to maneuver into the 1st round, an extra 1st rounder before the draft, and then on draft night up to number 11 to get Chris Olave.
So here's where we need a ruling on what you count as grading this draft, because by my definition, previously set down, you don't consider the Saints trading back into the 1st round with Philadelphia a couple of weeks ago. That's not relevant to their draft class. The only thing you consider is what they did on draft day, the trade up to go get Olave. But the fact that they had 2 first-round picks is just the lay of the land. That's just the stipulations of their draft. They are going into this draft with 2 first-round picks. We don't ask questions where those picks came from, because if you do, that's where you massively hate on the Olave pick. there are people out there that have sort of totted up the sum totality of what they traded when you consider all the trades. Whoa, they've traded all of these picks for Olave. Well, there's no way he's worth that. And this is true, but that's also not their draft. That's the team construction overall.
Well, because we're the PFF NFL podcast and we're nuanced here, we could do both. You can grade the things they did on draft night.
We've already given them, we've already talked about their first move. We've already talked about how they got the second pick. So now we're just talking about what they did on draft night. That's their grade.
I think you have to go back and look at everything that they gave up to go get Chris Olave. You have to.
You can't. It's not their draft.
You have to in this analysis. Maybe not in your draft grades, fine. But the draft grades didn't love the Saints. I think somebody factored it in.
I think a lot of people factored it in. That's my problem.
27th.
There's people out there giving them a D-. Come on. You can't do that without saying, well, they gave up all of this for Chris Olave. That's ridiculous.
I like the point you made. Maybe 4 teams. They might have been the 3rd team that got their wide receiver 1
yes.
on their draft board. So the Falcons obviously did with Drake London. The Jets probably did with Garrett Wilson.
Yep.
The Saints may have with Chris Olave at 11.
Mm-hmm.
And the Lions may have with Jameson Williams at 12.
Yeah, I think 4 teams got the top wide receiver on their board in this draft, of which the Saints were one.
But we analyzed team building in general. In the team building...
Not in draft grades, we don't.
I mean, we could do it on the draft grades show, right?
No, because then you're muddying the water and you're doing what these other people have done.
So when can we analyze everything that they gave up for Chris Olave?
We already did it. We did it in one part where we analyzed...
then they traded up again.
Yeah, so that's what we analyzed here in our draft grades episode. We already covered what they gave up to get back into the first round and why they did it and all those things. Now, all we're focusing on is what did they do with those 2 first-round picks?
I just think it's fascinating that to get Chris Olave and Trevor Penning and another player, Jordan Jackson. What do we have? 2023 first, 2024 second, pick 16, round 1.
Stop it.
3 first-rounders total? 4 first-rounders? No, 3 first-rounders total, a couple 2s, 3s. I mean, it's just a lot of stuff. I'm trying to follow Warren Sharp's tweet here that he's getting trashed for, too. People are dragging him for that, but yeah, that's fine.
Shocker.
Well, because he's adding the players into the mix, too. It's not about the players. It's about the draft capital and the opportunity cost. It's just a lot of investment specifically for Chris Olave. Specifically for him.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, like, Trevor Penning, you get him anyway. If you just did nothing, you get Trevor Penning. The moves... essentially,
the Saints traded
multiple firsts and 2s and the whole thing for Chris Olave. That's the thing that you can analyze.
What we're analyzing here in our draft grades of the New Orleans Saints is the Saints using number 16 overall and then a 3rd and a 4th round pick to go get Chris Olave.
Okay.
And then what they had remaining after they had done that.
So knowing in the back of our minds, but not putting into the grading criteria that they gave up a massive haul just to get in this position.
Correct.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then they gave up, essentially they flip 11,
remember,
16, they move up 5 spots, give up 3 and a 4.
Because remember, that's future Mickey's fault. That's future Mickey's problem. We are grading current Mickey.
Mickey
fact,
lives in Thursday night of the draft.
We're actually evaluating past Mickey, not future Mickey.
Okay. So what do you think of that?
Well,
3 players to move up 5 spots.
Yeah.
I mean, 2 extra players to move up 5 spots.
Right. So I think generally it's an overpay. On the other hand, there was a wide receiver run at that point, and they had clearly targeted. This was the team drafting for need, right? The thing we speculated when they made those the move to get back into the first round was, are they just doing this because they have a hole at left tackle and a hole at wide receiver, and they're going to fill both of them in the first round? If that was the plan, and that looks a lot like that was the plan, the run on wide receivers at the top of this draft is playing merry hell with what they were planning on doing. Because all of a sudden, you've got 2 wide receivers fly off the board in the top 10, and the guy that you want, presumably, Chris Olave, is he going to make it to 18?
No, probably not.
Exactly. So they make, 16. So they make the trade. They overpaid, but they got their guy.
You okay with that?
I mean, moderately. I would rather they didn't overpay, but I think
could have had Jahan Dotson.
I think those are mutually exclusive. I don't think they can get Chris Olave and not make that trade. I also think there was a significant difference between Chris Olave and Jahan Dotson. Now, Jameson Williams, I don't think he'd have lasted that long either. Obviously, he didn't. He went 12 to Detroit. So you're going to be, if they stayed where they were and they picked number 16, the chances are they're drafting wide receiver number 5, which is either Jahan Dotson, Sky Moore, George Pickens. These are guys that went a hell of a lot lower down. Christian Watson. They're not getting, if they think that Olave is wide receiver 1 in this draft, the drop between that and the group of guys that would have been available to them is huge.
I mean, but that's the whole point of this whole thing and why it's risky, right? I mean, just one example to think about. The Bills a few years ago when they drafted Sammy Watkins moved from 12, I believe it was 10 or 11, 12, whatever that is. They moved up to go get Sammy Watkins at 4, who was, I think, universally acknowledged as wide receiver 1 in that particular draft class. But Mike Evans went like 13th in that draft. Clearly has been a better player than Sammy Watkins, maybe outside of one season where Sammy Watkins was awesome, right? I mean, that is the risk with this whole thing. And probably more so at receiver than other positions like edge or whatever that are more predictable. But this is how the Saints operate, right? They went up to go get Marcus Davenport. Marcus Davenport could have, if he is Reggie White this season, I still think the Saints probably lost that Davenport trade. Not even before they had snaps, but in hindsight, they did as well, with all of the value that they gave up to go get one player.
Yes, I think it's a fair point. I think you're right, but because it just happens to the data happens to have fallen this way, I'm going to shit on you whilst agreeing with you anyway. I think generally speaking, you're right, and they probably shouldn't make that move. But number one, New Orleans more than any other team clearly believes that they're better at this than other people. Like, we're just able to identify talent better than you are. We're going to go get our guy. We don't care where you have him valued. We don't care what it costs to get him. We're going to get him. We're going to be right. Screw you. And generally speaking, recently, they have been kind of right.
It's had a great run.
Doesn't mean it'll continue, but that's just part of the process, right? They believe that they're better at this than you are. Now, you brought up the Sammy Watkins draft, right? And yeah, the difference between Sammy Watkins and Mike Evans probably wasn't much at the time. And Mike Evans has proven to be the better player. After both those guys, Odell Beckham Jr., even better, right? But we're not talking about the difference between 1 and 2. We're talking about the difference between 1 and 5. You know who the number 5 receiver in that draft was?
Who?
Kelvin Benjamin. You know who number 6 was? Marquise Lee. Number 7, Jordan Matthews. Number 8, Paul Richardson. That's what we're talking about here. It's not the difference between 1 and 2. It's the difference between 1 and 5.
It's the drop-off from that guy. I got you.
That's the thing. So New Orleans is looking at this and saying...
Is Olave the cutoff?
Saying we're not...
Jameson Williams
right,
the cutoff.
We're not debating between Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. We're debating between Olave and Christian Watson or Jahan Dotson or whoever. Like, we think
You're not trashing my point. I mean, there's some...
that's why they didn't want to do it. They don't want Kelvin Benjamin. They don't.
Okay. I wouldn't want Kelvin Benjamin either. I mean, Justin Jefferson was wide receiver 5 his year, wasn't he?
Probably, yeah.
Ahead of, Jalen Reagor was wide receiver 4.
Mm-hmm. I'm just saying, at some point,
like,
sometimes there are these big drop-offs in draft classes at one position. The Saints thought there was one right there.
Assuming
the rest of the league agreed, and it's
that is an analytical view that I can get behind. Is that you could say historically, hey, that there's a drop off between the top 3 and or 4 receivers in the next bunch or whatever it is, or if don't get QB5 because whatever historically. But of course, QB5 last year was Mac Jones. I mean, that's what's tough about those things. There's these historical precedents that are all tiny sample sizes, and then at the same point you say, well, Deebo Samuel and AJ Brown were second rounders. They were second round picks. So was Terry McLaurin was a third round pick. There's also their own Michael Thomas was a second round pick. So there's also this history of Cooper Kupp. There's also this history of receivers in the second and third round.
Yeah, I mean, look,
you gave up a third rounder. Who went in the third that they could have taken at receiver?
This is why we preach that, generally speaking, drafting for need is not a good thing to do. You don't want to put yourself in a position where you need to get a certain position in the draft, because if the draft doesn't fall your way, you're kind of boned. Your 2 options at that point, well, 3, I guess. Your 3 options at that point are to do what the Saints did, go and trade and make sure they get the guy, thereby giving up extra draft capital to fill a position that is already not necessarily the right way of doing it, to sit there and draft the next player at that position regardless of how good he is, so reach, essentially, or adjust your draft strategy, pick a different position, and then grab that guy later on down the draft and hope that there isn't this big drop-off. So the Saints had those 2 first-round picks. They're looking for wide receiver. They're looking for offensive tackle. As things happened, the top 3 tackles are gone, right? The top wide receivers are about to be gone. So if they had just sat there at 16 and 18, they would have gotten Trevor Penning, but they weren't in a position to get any of the 3 top guards. And they wouldn't have gotten Chris Olave. They would have had to either take a completely different position, which they don't want to do because they have the 2 holes that they need filling, or just pick the next receiver. Either way is not good. So it's not good process is what I'm saying. But once you're in that position, I think these are kind of the moves you have to make.
Yeah, I'm trying to take a bit of a more holistic approach. It's fascinating. Look, I love that the Saints do their own thing. The Rams do their own thing, and the teams have their own strategies. The Panthers doing their own thing, right? Rebuilding team, trading away draft picks, fine. Even though one of them's for C.J. Henderson, a former first-round pick. I think the tricky part here is like the Rams trading a 5 for Troy Hill because they've also maneuvered the cap enough that they could fit Troy Hill in there, right? The Saints they're not doing anything from that respect. Like they're up against it with the cap, but they're not offsetting it by drafting in volume to add to the team. They're also trading up and getting fewer players there. So they're getting fewer low contract players, and they're also paying to the max on their salary cap and they're restricting themselves from, say, the middle class of the NFL. And that's the second part of the Rams stars and scrubs strategy. It's not scrubs, it's middle class, right? It's being able to get the middle class players on the cheap. And doesn't that feel like where the Saints might be lacking? Because if you're aggressive in free agency and with the cap and you're aggressive in the draft, you're just going to end up having too many weaknesses everywhere.
I mean, I don't think they're really restricted from doing anything. I mean, they signed Tyrann Mathieu as soon as the draft was over. Not even as soon as he no longer counted against the compensatory formula.
Right, they did.
Tyrann Mathieu to a pretty decent deal, right? They can make moves.
That's a nice
They can make whatever moves they want to make. This is just the draft fell in a way that is not helpful.
But it's another top-heavy move, right? And you have a top-heavy move with top-heavy.
Is it top-heavy or is that like middle-class kind of deals?
They're paying him a lot. Are they going to pay him a lot of money?
I think it was $30 million for 3 years or something. It's like $10 million a year.
I mean, it's upper class. It's an upper class move. I don't think they're not tapping into the NFL middle class a ton.
The Troy Hills of the world.
The Troy Hills of the world.
3 years, 33 with 18.
That's tough. I mean, anytime you're over 10 in today's NFL, that's certainly upper class. It's not 20. I mean, it's not breaking the bank, but they're more likely to invest in, say, 1 Tyrann Mathieu rather than, say, 2 Troy Hills. When 2 Troy Hills would be a fascinating study here, right? Because you have Marshawn Lattimore as a star corner. You have Chauncey Gardner-Johnson as a really good slot. Last year, Paulson Adebo comes in, and they just drafted Alontae Taylor to maybe compete with him at corner. Like, what if you had just 2 Troy Hills there competing, where you have a solid starting number 2, where you actually have a question mark number 2 corner, right? So you have a star and a question mark rather than a star and solid in exchange for having a star safety in Tyrann Mathieu.
I mean, I think generally the Saints, I think they have a pretty good roster. Like, this is not – the problem the Saints have is that they are perfectly willing and happy to head into a draft with a glaring need that they need to fill. And all that does is expose you to unforeseen circumstances where the draft doesn't unfold the way you thought it would, and now you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, and you have to do something not good to fix it. You either get aggressive, you either get foolishly aggressive or foolishly passive, essentially. And they choose to be foolishly aggressive because that's the way they operate. They're always fix today's problem today, tomorrow's problem is future Mickey's issue. So I don't love the process generally to walk into the draft needing to fill 2 holes. Once the draft started to unfold the way it did, I think they kind of had to make that move for Olave. And ultimately what we're talking about is the Saints coming out of this draft with their 2 firsts intact, and those 2 firsts turning into Chris Olave and Trevor Penning with the addition of some extra draft picks.
I mean,
that's
look,
reasonable.
They have a chance at impact players here. Olave, dude knows how to get open, much like fellow Ohio State Buckeye, Michael Thomas. They're all both on the roster right now. Marquez Callaway there, it pushes him down the depth chart as well as Traquan Smith. And Deontay Hardy gets to be that, change of pace deep threat. It's a much better receiving core than they've had in the past. Trevor Penning steps in as the starting left tackle. Does have some work to do as a pass protector, but man, he could, I don't want to say improve that run game. He's not better than Teron Armstead. You're taking a step back, but again, that's the move you need to make when you lose a star like Armstead. So the offensive line has a chance to maintain where they are, and adding Tyrann Mathieu, that is an excellent move. The turnover at safety with Mathieu and Marcus May coming in, it'll look a little bit different back there, but they're both productive players. I think the round 2 pick, Alontae Taylor, he was 138 on the PFF draft board. He's athletic, never really been productive. There are questions if he's, did they want him at safety? Probably not now with Mathieu coming in, but he'll probably compete at the outside cornerback spot. And then the model loved. DeMarco Jackson, Appalachian State, pick 181. That's my favorite pick for the Saints in this entire draft.
Yeah, the Alontae Taylor pick, I think, was a pretty significant reach, and that might be worse than trading away the 3rd and the 4th to get Chris Olave. Like if you'd come away with this draft with the 2 first-rounders that you liked, and then I don't know what was available in the 2nd round at that point that they could have had instead of Taylor, I think that's probably a better thing than even if you had the 3rd and the 4th round pick and taking whatever receiver is available.
Yeah, and they're out of a first-round pick next year because of all this maneuvering, right? They essentially decided we want next year's first-round pick a year early. Which, by the way, it's not the craziest thing in the world, right? Because some people discount the future picks because people want their picks right now. In the Saints' mind, they've got their next year's first rounder this year. It's Chris Olave or Trevor Penning, or whichever guy you want to say is next year's pick. You got him a year early. But I think the rest of your team building strategy has to, have that in mind, that you're also out the first round pick next year. So like the Saints are going to come out of this year and it's like, oh, this other hole popped up. We need another linebacker or corner. We have to replace Marcus Davenport or whatever it might be. Let's do. Oh, we can't do it in the first round next year because we have. We have Chris Olave and Trevor Penning. We already had that guy. So you just have to be able to anticipate that and build around it. But you're right. The Saints have been really good at this through the years. Also had Drew Brees to help.
And Sean Payton.
So always interesting strategy from the Saints. And then the Tampa Bay Bucks. The Saints were low, right? We said?
Yeah, pretty low.
They were 27th. Tampa Bay Bucks finished toward the middle of the pack, 14th in the consensus. And we gave them a B because that's about what it feels like for the Bucks. Traded out of the first round, Logan Hall, 6'6", 283, interior pass rusher / maybe edge, but hybrid-y type of player that they get with their first selection. He should be able to contribute right away.
Yeah, so the Bucks went the other way, right? They were in a similar position to the Saints in terms of they're sitting there in the first round. They need an offensive lineman. They need a guard to replace Ali Marpet, who's retired. But the board doesn't go their way. All of a sudden, guards start getting drafted higher than we thought they were. Kenyon Green goes in the middle of the first round to the Texans. Zion Johnson goes. The offensive line, Tyler Smith. Anybody the Bucks might have been thinking of taking in the first round, off the board. So instead of doing what New Orleans did and seeing the run coming or anticipating it and making a trade up and going and getting their guy, they went, the guys we want aren't here, let's trade out. So they trade out of the first round to the top of the second and pick a different position entirely. They grab Logan Hall. I think a good player for that defense can come in and complement Avita Vea, probably more realistically replace an Ndamukong Suh at this point in his career, who doesn't appear to be a factor going forward. So that's a good pick. And then later on, the second round, 57, that's where they get an offensive lineman. They grab a guy there that can come in and probably compete to start right away. And sure, is that what you wanted? Would you prefer Zion Johnson if you were given the choice? Absolutely. But that's these are the risks, right? When you go into the first round with the need that you need to fill, this can happen. And you either treat it the way the Saints treat it or you treat it the way the Bucks did. And I don't hate this answer to it either. The solution to that problem that I would be the most harsh on is the sitting at the same position and just drafting the next guard.
If you just drafted Luke Gadecki.
Right, so they just drafted Luke Gadecki in the first. They did with the Patriots.
Maybe they would have taken Cole Strange.
Right.
if they
like,
had.
That's the thing that I would have the biggest problem with, is sitting there and just taking a guy at a massive reach because that's the need that you have. If you're aggressive to head it off and you trade up, I'm okay with that. I don't know that I would do it myself, but I don't hate the aggression. And if you do what the Bucs did, you trade down and get him lower on. Fine.
So we had so Gadecki comes in, played tackle at Central Michigan, of course, because he's a Central Michigan offensive lineman. Where did he start? What was his first position, Sam?
Tight end, Steve.
Tight end convert.
They all did.
J.J. Watt, Ryman, Gadecki. All of them.
I'm sure there's more. There has to be.
More. If you went to Western, Central, or Eastern Michigan, you are a converted tight end.
Yeah.
And then you just get tight ends and you just spread them around the field.
Yeah.
So Gadecki, I mean, he played tackle at 92.2 grade last year, and I mean he's got the early slot at left guard because last year's pick Robert Hainsey maybe competes there. You have guys like Aaron Stinney, Nick Leverett. I mean, nobody's established.
It's a job to be won.
Right, absolutely a job to be won. That can be won. That's pick 57. That's pretty solid for the Bucs, I think, maneuvering to do that. Because you're right, if they probably liked Gadecki enough. I mean, look, he was probably top 32 on their board, or top 35 or 40 on their board, right? Because that's how things diverge by that point. But they did a good job not taking him too high. Logan Hall, we actually had Gadecki higher than Logan Hall on our draft board. We had Hall down at 72. He goes at 33. I think part of it is the tweener aspect of it, right? So the same way DeMarvin Leal goes to the Steelers, I think Logan Hall going to the Bucs fits, right? You wouldn't throw Logan Hall into like the old school traditional the traditional 4-3 system and say, hey, go play 3 technique, all downs. The Bucs still use a 5 tech, and that's what Logan Hall's body type is, right? Line up over the tackle, kick inside, rush the passer from the interior on third downs. Intriguing size that they've added with Logan Hall and Joe Tryon-Shoyinka last couple of years as far as pass rushers go. And then I like Rachaad White at 91. I mean, as a player, whatever you want to say about running back, but third round, pick 91, Rachaad White, I think one of the best open field running backs in this entire draft, and something Leonard Fournette doesn't really bring to the table here. They might be expanding their pass game a little bit with White now in the mix.
Right, the receiving back that they haven't had. Like, remember, that was Giovanni Bernard last year for a period because they didn't have anybody else that could do it. Right? Ronald Jones has never been able to catch. Leonard Fournette is not a good receiving back. Gio Bernard became that guy, and look, Gio Bernard is not exactly a great running back in today's NFL. So it makes sense for this roster, for this offense, to get a guy that can fill that role.
Yeah, so just to be clear, too, like Fournette took great strides last year, but the Bruce Arians offense isn't asking the running back to, like, line up out wide and win one-on-one. It's not giving two-way goes. It's really a lot of, like, the running back is used in the check down game. It's like catch the ball, go upfield. What I'm wondering is with Arians out of the picture, and it's still Byron Leftwich, but, I mean, how much is Tom Brady going to have a little bit more impact here and say, like the way the Patriots used running backs was as a mismatch weapon, right? Like in this particular game, you're going to go own this linebacker and you're going to have 10 catches. And it was actually game planned. It wasn't just a check down thing. I wonder if White, maybe not right away, it's tough to do it right away, but if he has that type of ability to where he becomes a weapon more than just on third down, more than just as a check down guy. But he has that type of open field ability that the Bucs didn't have. So add some versatility on offense. Our guy Trevor Sickerman pretty connected with the Bucs. Said they really wanted a tight end, maybe a Trey McBride. They get Cade Otton, who's more of a run blocker there in the 4th round, and then that guy you mentioned, Zion McCollum, as the developmental corner, who's really athletic. Getting those guys in the 5th, him and Tariq Woolen, I think makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I like that as a pick. So I think generally the Bucs. They also, what do you make of the weird run on special teamers, kickers and punters in the 4th round? Why? The 4th. That's very high to be drafting specialists.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm torn on it because I know you can't predict kickers. It's tough to predict kickers. But the Ravens were in that mix because they did have 6 fourths, right?
Yeah, and they said, look, they had a 1 punter draft class.
So you just
one guy, and they took him in the 4th.
I mean, the 4th round hit rate's not. Fourth round's reasonable unless it's like your only pick. Like if you have 1 4th round pick and you have no 5 and you have a 6 and a 7 or something like that, and it's one of your 3 day 3 picks, it's tough pill to swallow. But I don't think it's crazy because the hit rate in the 4th round isn't great either. Even though there's a lot of players on the draft board where you're like, man, I'd love to have that guy. I don't want to waste it on a kicker or a punter, but I kind of get it. it's one of those things you try not to put yourself into that position, right? You don't want to be so kicker strapped or punter strapped that you have to take one in the fourth. At the same time, good kickers also cost money.
No, I know.
So there's a lot of cost savings there. I'm just talking through it here.
Drafting them seems fine. It was just unusual to see 3 of them, I think, go in the 4th round as opposed to the 5th or the 6th.
Kickers and punters. Yeah, there was a bunch.
Yeah, I think there was a kicker and 2 punters went in the 4th round. And then we didn't get one again until 6, and that was punt god, quote unquote, Matt Ariza from Austin, San Diego State Aztecs.
I think there's it gets, when you're a good team, I think sometimes it's very tricky to maintain your success because the Bills might be a good example, right? Their second pick was James Cook, the running back out of Georgia, who on this current roster, we talked all about it yesterday. Yeah, nice little something they don't have, but he's a running back. Like if you get 2 into that mix and you start drafting kickers and drafting running backs early and just trying to fill those niche roles too early, Sam, at some point that roster starts to get depleted. Like you got to keep your foot on the gas, right? And still, hey, we got 3 corners. We're still going to take a 4th because the guy's really good. You got to take the high value position still. And I don't know if the Bucs are starting to get into that. Like, we'll get the pass catching running back. We're going to get the blocking tight end because Brady's going to be gone soon. And if they don't get a quarterback, the roster's not going to look the same. So I think that's where the Bucs, the Bills, like some of these teams that are already good, the curse of being good is sometimes it might take you down too much of these rotational player paths when you still have to try to get starters, even if there's not a path to start right away. That all makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Under 2 hours.
Perfect.
Where the Bucs finish? 14th?
Yeah, middle of the pack somewhere.
They were solid. It was fine.
It was a decent draft. As I say, I like what they did in trading out of the first round when all the guards got taken and they would have had to reach to grab one.
I think that worked well. Because I was wondering too if they were going to get desperate because the run at guard started at 15.
Yeah,
there were guys going at 15, Kenyon Green and Zion Johnson at 17, that many people expected the Bucs to have an opportunity at 27.
Absolutely,
and I thought they did a good job.
And then, dude, when the Patriots are selecting Cole Strange, that must have just been like, oh god, like what is happening? All of the interior offensive line.
Well, they had traded out by that time, so they did not value Cole Strange as their starting guard at 27.
That's true.
But that's the other. I mean, that's the other knock on the Patriots thing, right? I have no idea where Luke Gadecki graded on the Patriots board. He might not be a fit for their gap scheme. He might not be a fit personality-wise, whatever it is. But are we 100% certain that Cole Strange is a better player than Luke Gadecki?
No.
Nobody is. So, work the board. All right, good job. Good job, Sam.
You too.
75% of the way there now. We got 24 teams done, 8 more to go tomorrow. We're going to be live on YouTube, 10:30 a.m. Be sure to join us. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. Go listen to the old episodes. Take your time. Work your way through it. Next week, quick scheduling update here. We're going to be going back to 2 shows a week. So 2 shows a week, Monday and Thursday.
I'm gonna have to make a pivot with the outfit for the Jackson Mahomes TikTok, because the thing that I ordered off Amazon to complete the outfit turns out isn't going to show up till like June sometime. I'm just not waiting that long, so I'm gonna improvise.
Put on a Mahomes jersey.
No, that's not the bad. I got it.
You got it?
I'm gonna improvise.
When are you doing this?
Probably next week sometime.
All right, and then you're off on the road trip.
Yeah, at some point.
All right, I'm gonna miss a couple shows next week too. I think we're going on vacation. Still finalizing the exact days, and then we'll go. I got to find some guests. Let me know, who would you like to hear as a guest? I'm going to try to get Big Rick. I got to talk to my friend Rick Spielman, see if he wants to be on there. Oh, gosh. And then who would you like to hear as a guest with me? Mark Brunell. Like, who else? Who else besides Mark Brunell?
How long into a Mark Brunell podcast would it be before Mark just wanted to end the call, his life, you know?
Based off our handshake interaction at the Combine,
wouldn't take long.
Less than 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Mark doesn't have time.
Unfortunate for like a 2-hour podcast.
He's trying to figure out how do I get Jared Goff to play better. You know, he's in a different world. Doesn't care. I don't think he wants to relive the glory days.
No.
Maybe he does. Maybe not enough people ask him about the mid-'90s Jags.
I wouldn't imagine many people on the Lions staff were asking him, look, just tell me about that game, the wild cards, you know.
How about the divisional round against the Broncos? Leaping over dudes.
People aren't asking him that anymore.
Yeah.
He's probably loving that conversation.
I won't bring up that he threw end zone interceptions in each of his AFC Championship games.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
I will not bring that up. Hurts still when I go back and see it.
Did you see Ryan Tannehill talking about, not just talking about, hey, it's not my job to mentor Malik Willis. He was apparently also talking about how he basically...
I want to discuss that, though. Go ahead.
We already did, didn't we?
Tannehill?
Yeah. That's how we got the Kurt Warner tweet in there. It was Tannehill that said it. And then Kurt Warner said, I don't get this not mentoring thing. Here, reach out to me if you want mentorship.
When did we talk about that?
Yesterday. And then you were whinging, well, Kurt runs a business. We've had this whole conversation already.
We did, yeah. This is our 6 of 6.
Yeah.
So far. Yeah.
Tannehill was saying that he was so, broken by losing in the playoffs that he basically needed therapy to get over.
Like this past year?
Yeah. Went to a dark place, needed, extensive therapy to get out to the other side of defeat. Which is a pretty big statement for an NFL quarterback to be making.
It is. I think you're starting to see more of that with the mental health stuff. And,
yeah.
Teams, by the way, I'll just say this too. Teams have a big role in that, and they're taking on a bigger role on having support systems for players and basically trying to handle those situations better and better. And that's the leadership, the guys that we talk about who are picket players and all that stuff. It's part of their role too. General managers and assistant GMs and head coaches, a part of it's all of that and being the support system for players when they need it. But that was part of that interview with Tannehill. Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought that was a pretty big thing to bring up and put out there. I don't know if a lot of people would have been happy saying that.
Yeah. Well, then don't ask him to be a QB coach too.
I'm not there to mentor anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as I said,
I do remember now. I said I'm not here to drag you. Yeah. Drag you through. Figure it out. All right, that's it. We'll see you guys tomorrow.